2, 1.
Good evening and welcome to Wigan's virtual council meeting. My name is Councillor Steve Dauber and I am the Mayor of Wigan. For members' information, this meeting is being live streamed, so please mute your microphone and turn off your video when not speaking to minimise the background noise and distractions. Should you wish to speak on an item, then please indicate this by using the chat facility and type in speak or S, and then wait until I invite you to speak. At that point, unmute your microphone and put your video on. Can I emphasise that the chat facility must not be used for private conversations between councillors and officers, and I will not take any inappropriate comments from the chat facility this evening, so please only use speak or S, and then I will bring you in at the relevant point. You can of course use the chat function to signify that you are against an item which is on the agenda by typing against or A, except for the budget items when a roll call will be taken by the Chief Executive. I will also request the officers who are administering the meeting to mute any member who may disregard the rules if I feel this is necessary, and any unnecessary interruptions will not be tolerated. Those same officers may use the chat facility to communicate with me regarding the workings of the meeting. Democratic Services will be timing the speeches, and if you are nearing the allotted time, then a message will be placed in the chat facility to give you a minute's warning. Please state your name for the audience before you speak, unless I have just mentioned your name. You will have been sent a separate etiquette sheet to help with the smooth running of this meeting, and could we please keep to that process? Should I lose a Wi-Fi signal for any reason, then may I suggest that the Deputy Mayor continues to take the item until I am reconnected. If any other members lose connection, then members should try to re-establish their connections, but we need to ensure that the meeting continues without delay. I also need to stress the correct use of the following rules. Rule 11.12, points of order. A member may at any time raise a point of order relating only to an alleged breach of these council rules of procedure or the law. The member must indicate the rule or law and the way in which he or she considers it has been breached. As Mayor, I will hear the member immediately, and my ruling on the matter will be final. Rule 11.13, personal explanation. A member may at any time request myself as the Mayor to allow them to make a personal explanation relating only to some material part of an earlier speech by that member which may appear to have been misunderstood in the present debate. My ruling on the admissibility of a personal explanation will be final. We now have a pre-recorded prayer which has been prepared for the council meeting by the Reverend Will Gibbons from Wigan Parish Church.
And so let us pray. Lord God, we give thanks for the work of our council and all who devote themselves to public service, and for each and every person who looks to love their neighbour as themselves. Lord God, we pray for this meeting tonight, that you would give wisdom and insight. We pray that discussions would be diligent and that decisions would be made that seek the common good. Lord, in this time of global anxiety, as we face this pandemic, we pray for all across the world who have contracted the virus, and we pray for their healing. We pray for all who care for them, that you would give them courage. We pray for all who feel isolated, that you would draw them into community and enable them to find support. And Lord, as we look to see recovery in our borough and across the nation, we pray for all who fear the future. And Lord, we pray that through this meeting and each of us, that we would play our part, that together we would create opportunities for all to flourish and to be filled with hope for the future. In Jesus' name, amen.
Can I remind members of the need to respect each other, and I will continue to chair these meetings fairly and to show impartiality. The rules of conduct for the meeting have been previously circulated to all members, and a copy is in your Modern Gov app library section. As this is the budget meeting, one of the most important meetings of the year, we need to give it our full concentration, as we owe this to our residents when setting the council tax. All group leaders have been offered separate briefings. Chief Executive, do we have any apologies for absence? Chief Executive, do we have any apologies for absence?
Can you hear me, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, we can.
Apologies, sorry, I think I had a technical. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. We only have one apology this evening, and that's from Councillor Grundy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right, thank you. Minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of December 2020. I will move the acceptance of these as a correct record. Leader, will you second?
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Can I put the minutes to the vote? All those against the approval of the minutes, please show in the chat facility. I have no one against, so the minutes have been accepted. Mayor's announcements. The New Year's Honours List. I wish to congratulate Catherine Elizabeth Spencer from Ashton in Makefield on receiving the MBE for services to the financial services sector during COVID-19. She is a senior manager at Lloyds Banking Group. The death of Honorary Freeman, Frank Catherton. It is with deep regret that I refer to the death on the 17th of February 2021 of Honorary Freeman, Frank Catherton. Frank was appointed an Honorary Freeman on the 6th of December 2000 and served the community, especially those with disabilities, over many years. Frank was a founder member of Wigan Access Committee, serving as its chairman for 13 years, and has been both chair and vice chair of the Wigan and Lee Society for Blind. As well as being branch chairman of the local guide dogs for the blind, Frank spent 16 years as a co-opted member of the former Social Services Committee, offering his invaluable advice to the council. The funeral service will be held tomorrow, Thursday the 4th of March at 11:30 AM at Chernock Richard Crematorium, and I will be attending on behalf of the council, but the numbers are strictly limited. Do any members wish to speak? And I have Councillor George Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Frank Catherton became a household name not only as his role as chairman for many disabled groups, but as a co-opted member of our council on the Social Services Committee. I met Frank when I joined this committee way back in the 90s, and we were all relaxed before the meeting when Frank came in with his faithful Labrador dogs, Gibson and Zach, if everybody can remember that. In 2000, the council made him an honorary Freeman of the borough on the same list of Billy Boston, Avril Fishwick, Kate Fussell, Wolf Brogan and others, which he was so proud of the award. But I also remember, Mr. Mayor, that in 2002, when I was the special interest member for this street scene, that the Mayor then, Alderman Jeff Roberts, Councillor Lynn Liptrot, special member for the disabled, and myself met up with the street scene team and Frank in Wigan Town Centre for a walkabout to understand the difficulties visual impaired people have in getting around the town centre of our borough. Frank brought a lot of issues that was needed for the disabled, and we collected the goods for him and also for the residents of our borough. Mr. Mayor, Frank was a great character and a true spokesperson for his disabled groups. My sincere condolences to his family. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Now I have Councillor Reader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know. I follow Councillor Davis with that one because he covered quite a wide breadth of Frank. I got to know Frank quite well over the years. He was a true gentleman and always a good word for anybody who he worked with. He was passionate about his work in communities, and that's where I worked with him. And the one thing I would say with Frank, he didn't let his disability get in the way of him actually getting to work on issues around the borough. He was a real stalwart for Wigan and a true Wigan person who loved the town. So my condolences go to the family and all his friends. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Reader. I have written to the family to extend the Council's deepest sympathy. At this point, may I ask for a minute's silence to show a mark of respect for Honorary Freeman, Frank Catherton. Declarations of interest. In accordance with guidance issued by the DCLG in September 2013, members who are council taxpayers, own properties, or are tenants in the borough do not need to declare a DPI in the setting of the council tax, since these do not materially affect the interest in the land. This does not apply to those persons who are more than 2 months in arrears with council tax, and so these people, if any, will have to declare this. Members should note their personal interest for the following: school governors, Wigan and Lee housing, inspiring healthy lifestyles, members of Greater Manchester Transport Committee, Transport for the North Scrutiny Committee, parish councillors, if any, and Lee Sports Village. Members are asked to consider relevant interests for the purpose of this meeting, and if there are any interests, members must leave the meeting, if necessary, during the relevant item and rejoin it after the item has been considered. The monitoring officer has provided advice to all members and relevant guidance has been issued. Please email any declarations to the Democratic Services Manager so that the minutes can be updated accordingly. Morality 2021-22. This item has now been deferred until the council meeting to be held on the 14th of April 2021. In moving the following reports, I will assume that all seconders will reserve the right to speak at the end of the other speakers. Constitutional issues. Local authority governors. The council is requested to approve the nominations for the appointment and reappointment of school governors as set out on page 22 of the council agenda. Are these nominations moved? I invite Councillor Bullen to move the recommendations. Councillor Bullen.
Apologies. Beg to move, Mr. Mayor.
Are the recommendations seconded?
Beg to second, Mr. Mayor.
Do any other members wish to contribute? I don't seem to have anyone. Leader, do you wish to speak now?
What on school governors, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, shall I go straight to the vote?
Please.
Right, I'll now put the report to the vote. All those against the approval of the report, please show in the chat facility. I have Councillor Brielle. I'm not sure what he's. We'll ignore that. The result of the vote is accepted.
Mr. Mayor, that's an F4.
You should be putting A against, Councillor, otherwise everyone's for it.
Well, I put F for it. Is that wrong, Matt?
Yeah, you should only put A against if you're against it. Otherwise, we'll assume everybody's for it. Okay.
Okay, thanks a lot.
The policy and budget framework, revenue and capital budget framework and council tax setting. Members are asked to note that as this is the budget report, we are required by regulations to have a named vote on any motions and amendments to motions on this item. The Chief Executive will read through a list of members' names. When your name is read out, you will simply need to unmute to confirm whether you are for, against, or abstain in relation to the vote, and then mute yourself again. Once everyone has voted, I will then declare the result of the vote. The leader will speak for the length of his presentation, and in doing so, will invite his cabinet to speak on their relevant area on his behalf. The council is requested to consider the recommendations as set out at page 26 of the report. The report was considered by cabinet at its meeting held on the 18th of February 2021. The views of the Confident Council Scrutiny Committee were also taken on board at a later meeting of the cabinet that day. I now invite the leader and his cabinet to present the budget and to move all the recommendations. Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think when you consider that the last time we actually all met in the council chamber.
I'm sorry, Councillor, we have a point of order. Councillor Jones.
Sorry about that, David. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to call a point of order. I believe procedure's been broken this meeting. I'd like to ask where it's been passed for this meeting that amendments are not debated. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
It's a constitutional rule that's been in place since 2018, I'm told, Councillor Jones. And as I said earlier, I'll send you that. I'll make sure that the rule is sent to you. Can I ask you to continue, Leader?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I was starting by saying it's 12 months since we last all met in the council chamber to discuss the budget last year. And it's also today the anniversary of the first reported COVID case in the borough. I don't think any of us could foresee the year in front of us when we met last time in the council chamber and the impact that it would have on the lives of the people of this borough, and also the financial constraints that many local authorities and even government departments felt during this year due to the pandemic. Can I also first of all start by thanking Paul McKevitt and all the finance team, plus my cabinet colleagues and the SMT members for the work that has gone in over this year to bring this budget with you here tonight. What we're going to present tonight, Mr. Mayor, is once again a balanced budget. And this year we will also announce what will be the lowest council tax in Greater Manchester. And what I want to announce is that the basic level of increase for the budget will be 0.99%, and for the 7th year we will take the government's instructions about the 3% increase to cover the cost of adult social care. And the Deputy Leader in his presentation will say more about that issue. I personally think, Mr. Mayor, that we should be proud of the achievements that we've had this year in terms of how we dealt with the pandemic while still delivering services to a very high standard, and became the envy of a lot of authorities across the country. Last year we did announce about the Rugby League World Cup in 21, and thankfully and hopefully those games will be played at Leigh Sports Village in front of crowds. I think it's important that there's a statement made as soon as possible about the opening of the sports grounds and the stadia in terms of the attendances, what could be at that event. And also following on from that, Mr. Mayor, got the Women's Euros also taking place at Leigh Sports Village. I think we all fully understand the pressures that's taking place in our town and city centres, and I think the Chancellor has actually touched on some of it today, although I've not yet seen the detail. And I think it's so important that the government do react and support our retail sector. One could never envisage the amount of major closures we've seen in some of the biggest chains in British retail. We, once again, Mr. Mayor, I think it's only right, and it is renewable every year, that we retain the free car parking in town centre car parks. And we try to give as much support as we can to the town centre. We'll also be announcing tonight, Mr. Mayor, that we intend to support our communities, our community volunteers, and many of the organisations that have had such a big impact on the way we've dealt with the pandemic and dealt with daily life during this past year. And tonight, Mr. Mayor, we're going to launch the new Community Recovery Fund, which Councillor Reedy will give details in his speech. I'm pleased to announce we're also getting to the end of the renovations at Leigh Town Hall. And I do know from speaking to people how important and how privileged and honoured they feel to have Leigh Town Hall as a major building within their centre. And we're now going to see that very close to completion and hopefully open this summer, where it will be the new home for our archives, new museum, exhibition space and a public research room. I just need a drink, Mr. Mayor. We also announced at the last council meeting, Mr. Mayor, that we intend to recognise the work that was carried out by NHS staff and frontline workers, and not forgetting the voluntary sector during the pandemic. And we will be placing the stars to recognise this both in Belief Square in Wigan and Leigh Town Hall Square, and hopefully we'll get that in place this summer. We'll also announce, and I think we all know, that we're bringing leisure services back into the council. And what we want to do is to build on what Inspired Healthy Lifestyles have done, and we want to create a leisure and culture service in line with our ambitions for the borough. Last year, Mr. Mayor, after much debate, we launched our town campaign to show our commitment to our district centres across the borough, but unfortunately the pandemic once again got in the way. We intend to start this as soon as possible. Once this is complete, we will start to look at other centres in terms of a town centre phase 2. We do look forward to the year ahead with confidence. I think many people now, following the vaccinations, can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and hopefully we can build on what we agreed for Deal 2030. And I'm very hopeful for 21-22 will be a very successful year for the borough. Mr. Mayor, as you know and I know, there are lots of concern about potential job losses across both public and private sector. And many of our neighbouring local authorities have already announced cuts to services, cuts to jobs. There'll be no cuts to our services, Mr. Mayor, and there'll be no cuts to jobs. And what I wish to announce tonight, Mr. Mayor, that we are going to create within this authority 100 apprenticeships and graduate jobs within the council, and to lay a marker down for everyone else that we all need to do our bit to support this younger generation and give them the opportunities that they deserve. Mr. Mayor, I'm now going to ask Councillor Raymond to speak on the budget. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Raymond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to speak. Mr. Mayor, since we presented our last budget last year, a great deal has changed. It has been a challenging and a tragic year for many of us. Although vaccine is a huge breakthrough and will address the disease, but the journey to recovery will be a long and difficult one. Today's budget has been prepared in the backdrop of the ongoing pandemic, building on the deal principles, addressing the challenges of today, and sowing the seeds for tomorrow. Mr. Mayor, in the last 12 months, people of Wigan have needed the council more than ever, and we are proud of our response. We have risen to challenge, supporting and protecting our people, looking after our homeless, providing free school meals to more than 10,000 children, looking after victims of domestic abuse, making thousands of welfare calls, distributing medicines and hot meals, redeploying hundreds of staff for our COVID response team on very short notices, providing life-saving protective equipment to our frontline workers, extending council tax support to our struggling families, processing thousands of applications for business grants, and paying millions of pounds to local businesses and our residents and colleagues. The list goes on. Mr. Mayor, I'm proud to say that when Wigan needed us the most, we were there. We were there for our communities, our businesses, and our families. Words cannot do justice to the dedication and commitment of our workforce. The last 12 months have clearly shown that this council can transform, innovate, and deliver in the most challenging of times. I hope this government truly recognises the role of the local government when it comes to dealing with real people facing real life issues. Mr. Mayor, a decade of austerity has failed people in Wigan, as it has failed communities across the country, and particularly our elderly and children. Colleagues, unemployment is on the increase. Universal credit claimants are on the rise. Destitution is increasing by each day, and there is a real danger that deprived communities across the country who were let down by austerity will also miss out on the recovery. Mr. Mayor, let me bring this to home. Over the last decade, 40% of this council's budget has been cut, and next year we must make saving of a further £9 million. The government expects council to increase council tax by almost 5% this year. Colleagues, when the Chancellor announced £3 billion investment in local government, over half of that was derived from council tax rises. 4 councils have asked the Minister for Communities for dispensation to use capital receipts to balance the budget, as they have no resources or cash to keep going otherwise. Mr. Mayor, the crisis in adult social care is not new. In 2014, the National Audit Office warned this government of this time bomb, but the government ignored these warnings. The recommended 3% adult social care precept will generate different amounts of money in different areas of the country, bearing no relevance or to the need or the tax base. Colleagues, you will remember we also have a £17 million overspent in our children's services, with pressures adding every day, which means that even a full council tax increase of 4.99% wouldn't even cover the social care cost in Wigan. Just to reiterate, This is how the government expects local authorities to provide statutory services and support our most vulnerable groups. Mr. Mayor, we are rightly proud of our record of having frozen the level of general council tax for 6 years. However, because of the government's clear move to funding councils through council tax rises, we had to take the tough decision of increasing the council tax this year. Therefore, Mr. Mayor, I propose to increase the general council tax by 0.99% and take the adult social care precept of 3% as suggested by the government. So, what this increase in council tax means for the people across Wigan. Most of our properties are in Band A. They will be paying £35 extra per year. That's £2.91 per month. And for a Band D property, it will be an increase of £52.50 per year. That's £4.37 extra per month. For the few, this increase is manageable, but for most of our residents, this will take the toll on their tiny budgets. We realise that many more people will be moving to universal credit and many more people will be losing their jobs. So we remain steadfast to support them with our generous welfare offer and council tax support scheme. 13,190 households will be able to claim 100% council tax relief, while 14,997 households will qualify for 80% of this relief. And our welfare desk is always open to help. Mr. Mayor, even after the proposed 3.99% increase, Wigan remains the lowest council tax in Greater Manchester and one of the lowest in the country. Mr. Mayor, this government has betrayed local authorities of all political colours across the country. Our neighbouring local authorities are making huge cuts to their frontline services and are balancing the books by making redundancies and using reserves. But this Labour-run council remains committed to stand by our struggling families and to invest in Wigan, its people, its communities and its future. Our financial management is robust and our treasury function is resilient, and the team Wigan is well prepared to initiate, facilitate and kickstart the recovery. Mr. Mayor, we believe in prevention and early intervention, so we are going to announce £2.5 million per year for next 4 years in adult social care for improving outcomes, fostering enablement and independence. Mr. Mayor, we want to give best start to our children, so we are going to invest £10 million in the core budget of our children's services. We are announcing more than £700,000 for homelessness to help people before they reach the crisis point. Mr. Mayor, we are going to kickstart the local economy and provide a much needed fiscal stimulus. We are injecting £29.4 million in local housing market next year. This investment is for buying new homes and to replenish the stock. And we aim to employ local workers and local businesses wherever possible. Mr. Mayor, domestic abuse has soared in the last 12 months. So we are going to invest more than £700,000 to help victims of domestic abuse. Colleagues, we pledge to focus more resources on our green agenda. So we are renewing our pledge to plant 1 million trees, and we'll go a step further by delivering Leaders' Pledge to plant 750 additional trees to commemorate the people who lost their lives to COVID. Mr. Mayor, we believe in children and young people. We believe in their future and we believe in a prosperous tomorrow. So the leader has announced 100 new apprenticeships for our young people, costing us £10 million in next 3 years. And we believe, working closely with the private businesses, we will achieve a thriving and more inclusive economy. Mr. Mayor, our volunteers and community groups have been our best allies in our journey through austerity. In the past 12 months, we have recruited around 1,000 more volunteers, and we hope to continue working with them. So we are going to announce a new fund for small community groups so they can keep enriching our social and economic fabric. Colleagues, we support local people taking pride in areas they live. So we are announcing £600,000 for the Our Town Fund, which will be spent to revitalise the town centres across the borough, and we are looking to extend it even further. Mr. Mayor, since we declared climate emergency in 2019, we have worked really hard to deliver our plans. I am glad to say that so far, we have more than £1.5 million in internal and external funding to deliver several environmental initiatives. Mr. Mayor, this council is ready for the recovery and building back. Building back better, fairer, greener, cleaner, and more inclusive. Finally, and most importantly, Mr. Mayor, I want to thank everyone who has been a part of our enormous effort to deal with COVID. I thank David for his strong leadership. I thank Alison for leading such a mammoth response in very unpredictable circumstances. I want to thank Paul and our wider finance team for being proactive and robustly managing our finances. I want to thank every member of the Wigan team. I want to thank our key workers, our bin crews, our street scene teams, our porters, our cleaners, SDF staff and volunteers. And finally, Mr. Mayor, I want to thank our residents and businesses who listen to the guidelines and adhere to the rules. Mr. Mayor, I am delighted to commend a balanced, no cuts, no redundancy and a financially prudent budget to the council tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll now move on to Deputy Leader, Councillor Cutcliffe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation of 3.99%, made up of 3% of which is the adult social care precept, perhaps needs some explanation as to why we're having to levy that. So in 2010-2011, the coalition government took a political decision to impose austerity on the people of this country in response to the global financial crisis. The social care obviously took a hit in terms of the implications for local government funding. The Institute of Fiscal Studies at the time highlighted that proportionately Wigan Council was the third worst hit in the country by losing £160 million. So that's the situation that we've been faced with. And throughout the country, there's been concern about the funding of adult social care and the ageing population and people of working age with a learning disability or mental health issues. In fact, to return to the level of service that was provided in 2010-11 would need government funding of £8 billion. That's just to get us back to the level of service that we were at nationally in 2010-11. The government, recognising and responding to the crisis in adult social care that was existing in the country, proposed a green paper and a white paper in 2017 to address the issues that were affecting adult social care. That green paper, that white paper, has been postponed and delayed 5 times, and we still await it. I'm not a great one for quoting Boris Johnson, but I think it's important to just remember what he said in July 2019 when he became Prime Minister. He said, and I quote, My job is to protect you or your parents or grandparents from the fear of having to sell your home to pay for the costs of care. And so I am announcing now on the steps of Downing Street that we will fix the crisis in social care once and for all. And with a clear plan we have prepared to give every older person the dignity and security they deserve. 18 months later, we're still waiting to hear what that plan is. That plan that is going to once and for all fix social care. And there was a report out this week, I think it was in the Times on Monday, that indicated that of Conservative councillors, many of whom have the responsibility for providing adult social care in their area, 74% of Conservative councillors believe that the government should address the funding crisis and give more funding for social care. Interestingly, only 36% of Conservative MPs felt that there was a need for the government to increase the amount of money that they give to social care. So interestingly, the people who have to deliver it, the Conservative councillors up and down the country who have to deliver it, over 3/4 of them believe that the government should be giving more money. And yet the people who can give them more money, the MPs, only 1/3 of Conservative MPs believe that there should be more government money for social care. So we look at the situation in Wigan and the pressure on our adult social care budget means that there is a need for an extra £5 million at least within this borough next year. 3% precept, which the government are assuming we will put on the people of this borough, it will raise us just in excess of £3 million. So the pressure on the budget is in excess of 5 million, and a 3% rise accrues us with 3 million. Still a shortfall. And when you look at the implication of that, over 80% of the properties in this borough are band A and B. And so we have what is called a low council tax base. So 3% on a band D level does not raise a huge amount of cash, like I say, 3 million. And the other thing is, bear in mind that the health of people in the north of England is worse than the national average. People are in ill health for longer towards the end of their life. Healthy life expectancy is worse than it is in the leafy suburbs down south. And when you compare what happens in Wigan to what happens in Surrey, Surrey, who is affluent, who's not been impacted by the cuts to local government that we have, or the level that we have, most of their properties are in bands E, F, G and H, and therefore a 3% rise for them brings in much more money, a significant amount of money, more than it brings in for us. And the other thing about that is, because of property values and because of people in the north are generally have lower incomes, in Wigan, the council end up paying for the care of many people because they don't have adequate resources. Whereas in Surrey, many people have very high value properties, are more affluent and self-fund. So Surrey Council has to pay for less care than we do, proportionately, and actually achieve more money from a 3%. So this is the government recognising the issues in social care, and Boris Johnson telling us he had the answer, but putting the costs of social care on the council taxpayers of this borough and every borough in the country, because virtually every council will be applying that 3% adult social care precept. And it's interesting what Councillor Raymond was saying, because actually, if you live next door to Wigan in Tory Bolton, not only is your council tax in the region of £200, £250 more than it is if you live in Wigan, but this next year you'll be facing £32 million worth of cuts. And in terms of cuts, I mentioned Surrey getting increased funding, far more than Wigan. They are actually implementing £12 million worth of cuts in adult social care alone. And here we have a council in Wigan that is imposing no cuts in services, no redundancies, has frozen its element of council tax for 6-7 years, and is now only increasing it by 0.99%. And that's after a year when we've seen a loss of income to the council and actually a lot of additional expenditure because of the COVID pandemic. And so what we have in Wigan, despite all those disadvantages that we have, is Wigan is one of the only councils in the country that has a balanced adult social care budget. And that's been done by sound financial management and transformation. And so the council took a different approach to the challenge of austerity and demographic change by transforming the way we deliver services, underpinned by the deal for adult social care and health to improve outcomes and the quality of life for residents, and simultaneously delivering the efficiencies that we've been required to make. Over the last few years, recent achievements through transformation has been housing with care, including in the last year or two, 3 specialist autism and learning disability services development: Mayfield, Hindle Lodge, Marigold, and that's in addition to ones earlier like Tamfield, and for older people, Little Lane, which have provided new build facilities for people, older people and people with a disability. And the result of that has been our ability to repatriate residents who were in out of borough placements back into their own communities at less cost. Daycare reform, we've shifted from a traditional building-based model to vibrant community connections. 14 buildings reduced to 5, reducing the significant overheads of paying for bricks and mortar and maintenance and heating and lighting. We've transformed the way home care services are delivered across the place with an ethical framework around home care provision. And we focused, like Councillor Raymond said, on early intervention and prevention. Many authorities, as a result of the cuts, have reduced the amount they spend on early intervention and prevention. But this council has invested in early intervention services, and we now invest double, 100% higher than we did in 2011. Despite the challenge of austerity, we have doubled the amount we spend on early intervention and prevention. And that approach has benefited the local health services. And so we look at what's happened over the past 12 months in terms of care and support through COVID-19 and the care market. We know that care homes were badly affected by the COVID pandemic. The National Audit Office indicated that 25,000 people in the early part of the pandemic were discharged from hospital to care homes without a test to see whether they were COVID positive or not. And during the first wave, we saw significant deaths across the whole country of people in care homes. The Select Committee in the House of Commons said that care homes have been thrown to the wolves. But we in Wigan undertook a significant programme of support to ensure the operational and financial resilience of our local care providers in response to COVID. Why? Because 2,000 of our residents live in a care home setting. And that included a programme of targeted support for care homes introduced through the Wigan Care Home Resilience Plan. So the headlines include, we provided £7.2 million of additional financial support to the local care market, funded through a combination of government and local initiatives. And that included ensuring frontline workers working in the care sector, putting themselves at risk day in, day out, going in, looking after the people they care for. We ensured that frontline care workers were not financially disadvantaged when required to self-isolate in line with government guidance or when absent from work due to COVID-19. The government paid people statutory sick pay, and people in those low-paid jobs couldn't afford to go off. And what this council did was provide money in order to boost those frontline care workers to the normal weekly wage. Funding's also supported the introduction of rapid testing, strengthened workforce capacity, and effective infection prevention and control. Right at the beginning of the pandemic, this council supported and paid for and provided personal protective equipment to all those working in the care sector. Because if you remember back to the initial phase of the COVID, there was inadequate personal protective equipment and real concerns about supply, but we independently sourced and supplied personal protective equipment and have continued to do so throughout the whole of the pandemic. And what we also did was establish council staffing squads for deployment into care homes. Many of the care homes working under pressure, staff having to self-isolate, or staff actually having COVID, being COVID positive themselves. We actually put staffing squads to help those care homes that were particularly struggling, to complement and reinforce the capacity of the providers for those older people and those people with disabilities that were suffering during that. We had a proactive programme of vaccination and testing within care settings, and feedback from providers that work not only in Wigan but with other local authorities were extremely positive. And some providers indicated that the approach that Wigan had made and the support that they were received was unique. They had never had that level of support from it and were not receiving that level of support from any other area. In addition to support for the care market, the council, in partnership with our NHS and health partners, has strengthened investment in local test and trace, health protection, outbreak management initiatives, and introduced new models of support, including Better at Home, to reduce pressure on hospital services during the pandemic. Because we know how stressed the hospital services have been during this pandemic. And so the cost pressures and investment in adult social care for the next year, the precept is required to contribute to those anticipated cost pressures of almost £5 million. Pressures relate to the impact of an ageing population with the volume and complexity of older people requiring care continuing to rise, alongside an increase in the costs of caring for younger adults. And actually, a lot of the pressure in adult social care is that of working age adults who have learning disabilities or mental health problems, and the cost of caring for increasingly complex cases is the pressure that exists within adult social care. The preset will enable recurrent investment in care home fees to ensure that the ongoing sustainability and quality of local provision, including support for an increase in pay for Wigan carers, which will cost approximately £2.1 million, to ensure that those people working in the care sector, looking after our older population, looking after people with a disability, can have an improvement, an increase in their pay. And work's continuing to transform adult social care and health services in Wigan, rooted in the principle of community wealth building around our ethical home care framework and a commitment to early intervention and prevention. This includes investment in new models of care to help people remain independent within the communities. So part of the planned transformation and investment is £750,000 further investment in reablement services in Wigan over the next 2 years. I know many authorities, as a result of austerity, have reduced the reablement service. Now in Wigan, our reablement services was one of the first in the country to be rated outstanding by CQC, and it has since been reassessed by CQC and has retained its outstanding. When it started off, it had 4 people working in the reablement service. When it first got outstanding, we had 20 people working in reablement. When it actually achieved its retained its outstanding status, it had 82 people working in it. And we are further investing in reablement services. Why? Because 70% of people who receive reablement services to help them become independent, to help them retain their skills, do not need any ongoing social care support after having reablement. And that investment will be achieved through a traineeship in care model, helping to create new jobs for young people in Wigan impacted by the pandemic, because in any crisis, young people are always the one who suffers worse. And so the impact on that, and that is one of the first initiatives that was announced by the leader about apprenticeships and traineeships. We're going to continue with the redesign of housing with care in the borough to align it with a place-based model of the delivery, and enabled in part through investment in new housing, accommodation and digital technology. I spoke about our previous new builds around providing much better accommodation for older people and people with a disability. And what I can announce now is an additional 81 units of new supported accommodation that are already planned for 2021-22 across various supported living and extra care schemes. And £500,000 transformation fund to support the local care market. The care market has been severely impacted by the COVID pandemic, and this is in parallel to the recurrent investment in care fees that I mentioned earlier. The development of new models of care in partnership with NHS providers.
Sorry, I have a point of order. Councillor Jones.
Apologies, Keith, if I'm wrong, but we must have a time on this. You know, we try to save time, not having debates on amendments, and I've been here 20 minutes now. As much as I like you, Keith, I can't stay awake much longer.
Councillor Jones, as this is part of the presentation, there is no time limit. But once
I apologise then. I apologise. Yeah, there's nothing on the agenda.
Please don't.
There's nothing on the agenda showing
when
about.
We get back to the script where we're debating the budget. They're on strict time limits. The leader's 10, and everybody else gets 5. Okay.
Thank you.
But unfortunately for the presentation, there is
Unfortunately,
you
mean.
I'm speaking to Councillor Jones, Mr. Conley.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sure he's quite accepted my answer there. Right, continue, Councillor Conley.
I'm not so far off finished, Steve, so you're all right. The other thing that is being developed in the next year or so are the development of new models of care in partnership with the NHS. We need to support people to return home from hospital and to reduce the number of people that are permanently admitted into a care home. And that includes early scoping work for Lakeside Unit at Lee Infirmary. The opportunity to provide reablement, step up, step down facility, discharge to assess facilities can be a great relief to the NHS in enabling them to get people out of hospital or prevent people going into hospital. But also with intensive reailment, we can ensure that people can get back home with support as necessary and reduce the number of people that are permanently admitted into a care home. On the modernisation of day opportunities, we've got to look at supporting people with disabilities much better, enabling them to get into employment or social enterprise. And so that again is part of the investments for this year. So whilst we retain a balanced budget, whilst we retain no cuts in services, no job losses, we are actually putting forward a proposal to actually improve the quality of life for those older people and people with a disability in this borough. And that's a credit to this council, because this council is one of the only councils in the country that has a balanced budget and that is improving services and that is investing in early intervention and prevention and reablement. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Cunliffe. We'll now move on to Councillor Anderson. Councillor Anderson.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I congratulate the Deputy Leader on a very informative presentation? It certainly covered quite a wide ranging subject area and very important subject area as well. Thankfully, my presentation probably may be a little shorter, but still contains some very important points to make. This has been an unprecedented year due to the pandemic, and thanks need to be given to all the agencies within the Place and Community Safety Partnership for the teamwork in addressing the challenges that are presented. We've mobilised joint plans and resources and coordinated our teams on the ground to provide a joined up response to keeping our communities safe. Whether through the Community Resilience Team and targeted youth services, taken to the street to educate and advise our young people on their safety, or daily tasking with GMP, licensing, environmental services, the Public Service Reform Team and others to implement effective enforcement and compliance plans. We have worked hard to ensure the safety and security of our residents, proactively calling individuals who we know could be at an increased risk of domestic abuse, continuing to triage antisocial behaviour complaints and neighbourhood nuisance, creating multi-agency approaches and working closely with GMP to tackle ongoing problems in identified hotspot areas. Looking back over last year, we've seen improvement in some crime areas, for example, 60% falls in thefts, 13% falls in burglary and a 9% drop in car crime between November 2019 and October 2020. However, we know drug offences, knife crime, robbery and ASB are increasing. We've had increased reports of ASB and neighbour nuisance during the pandemic. And we think this has been driven by more people being at home all day and tensions rising between households. Our new community resilience model saw a decrease pre-COVID-19 in reported ASB. So we want to continue to work with GMP and other partners to tackle these issues and decrease the numbers again in the future. We've undertaken consultation on the continuation of our public spaces protection orders for Wigan and Leigh town centres to help create safe and vibrant areas, including the nighttime economy. There was overwhelming support for these orders to continue, and new signage has been commissioned in plain English and highlighting the place and community safety partnership function, and these signs have been erected in our town centres. Another example of our joint work is introduction of our new community domestic abuse service this year, delivered by DIAS in partnership with Well Women. Having a dedicated helpline, localised community support, counsel and education offer within the community where people can make contact in confidence and get the support they need. It is a lifeline to our residents, linked into wider provision and independent domestic violence advisors. They can offer early prevention intervention to stop the escalation of domestic abuse in the borough. We've also been successful in receiving serious crime and violent crime grant from the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office and have a joint programme of work to reduce serious and violent crime, which is overseen by the partnership. Equally, we've been successful in bidding for £500,000 Safer Streets funding for the Westley area and have a full programme of works to improve the safety of the area and increase community cohesion locally. We are pleased to have been able to bring this extra resource to the borough to support our place and community safety ambitions, as set out in the Deal 2030, to create strong, safe and friendly communities that care about each other. We're also taking multi-agency approaches to tackling ongoing ASB and other problems across the borough. This is now embedded as a way of working with regular community cohesion meetings with elected members starting to take place in each service delivery footprint area. Going forward, we're developing a borough-wide strategy across the partnership to address ASB and particularly youth ASB, which we know has become a real issue in some communities. The Place and Community Safety Partnership met in October to review our priorities to ensure that we're fit for purpose for the next 3 years. We've commissioned a joint needs assessment to really understand the community safety issues in the borough and consider the impact of COVID-19. This will help us create effective priorities and target our collective resources in a more systematic way. With lead officers from across the partnership leading key responsibilities for the borough and using a new Place and Community Safety dashboard to measure our success. There's also important work to do this year to respond to the new domestic abuse duty, which will place statutory responsibilities on council and partners to support residents at risk of experiencing domestic abuse. These are wide-ranging powers, and we're in the process of developing a multi-agency plan to put Wigan in the best place to respond. We want to continue to build community safety into our neighbourhood model, aligning the community resilience team, for example, to our service delivery footprints, to create closer localised working on the ground with GMP neighbourhood policing teams and targeted youth services, also linking to the team around the school. We are committed to holding each other to account. The recent inspection report review of GMP victim services has given us all cause of concern. We will work with GMP to understand the plans being put in place to ensure improvements are being made. This will form an important parcel of work of the Greater Manchester Police and Crime Panel in the next 12 months and beyond. We welcome a GMP review this year of our prevent processes and procedures across the system to stress test our approaches and identify any improvements we can make. We also look forward to working with the new Greater Manchester Probation Service from June 2021 to input into future service design and ensuring that the needs in Wigan are met in any new arrangements. Going forward, we know that the pandemic and broader consequences such as economic duress, the impact on young people, increase in mental health and vulnerability are all areas that can drive up crime in an area. The Place and the Community Safety Partnership will be working hard to ensure we pick these trends up early and bring all of our resources together to tackle the priorities of the borough. We're already focused on domestic abuse, robbery, burglary, ASB and serious crime areas where we're seeing increasing trends. In regards to ASB, we've launched Operation Bluefin this week, which will form our joint approach and response to address ASB in hotspot areas, including increased focus on criminality, enforcement options and diversion activities in a coordinated way for the borough. We look forward to the lifting of COVID-19 restrictions so we can start up our diversionary programmes and activities again to focus energy of our young people in more positive ways. We also look forward to increased policing numbers through the additional policing precept and will lobby to ensure that Wigan Borough gets the number of officers it deserves. Finally, we are keen to to invest more in target hardening where we're experiencing issues for vulnerable people in our community. We'll bring forward proposals for additional CCTV provision in due course. This is along our future key priorities. As I've said, developing proposals for a pandemic recovery fund, for target hardening and CCTV in hotspots. Support proposals for more neighbourhood resources and focus working with GMP. To focus on addressing issues of ASB which have been exacerbated by the pandemic and lack of diversion activities due to restrictions. We need to complete the strategic needs assessment from which we can develop our 3-year strategy aligned to the GM police and crime plan and focusing on our priorities. We need to clearly outline our recovery plan, including containment principles as we start to lift restrictions. We need to ensure we are fully prepared for the new domestic abuse bill. The additional duty this places under local authority and partners. Aligned funding will be used to ensure capacity across the life course and investment in areas highlighted by the gap analysis. We also want to learn from the Safer Streets programme on designing out crime and ASB and align this to regeneration commitments, including further investment in CCTV. We need to re-establish reduction of offending work stream led by the GM probation service and ensure this is life course to include the work of talented youth services and the youth offending team. This needs also to include the future functions of the integrated offender management team. We need to have an input into the GM review of victim services and continue to campaign for services which meet local demand and are locally delivered and aligned to the inspector recommendations. Working in partnership with GMP to ensure the vulnerability restructure captures the needs of residents and brings additionality to support already in place. We need to ensure and establish a robust and sustainable borough-wide approach to youth ASB from engagement to enforcement. In conclusion, Mr Mayor, I want to stress that this is a budget for tomorrow with a keen eye on the needs and challenges of today. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Anderson. I'll now move on to, thank you, Councillor Anderson. I'll now move on to Councillor Bullen. Councillor Bullen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Good evening, everyone. I'm pleased to report that our Children's Service Directorate is making steady progress on its improvement plan as last reported to Council. Highlights include the recent successful recruitment of social workers and some key experienced social care managers, improved systems to monitor performance data, and strengthened governance and accountability through the Wigan Deal for Children Board. Our budget for children's social care has been under pressure for some years due to government cuts, particularly in early intervention grants. This has led to several overspends in order just to keep our children and young people safe. The COVID pandemic situation has meant further pressure on the service, with a significant increase of referrals for help and support coming in, a 49% increase in the number of children subject to a child protection plan, and a 34% increase in the numbers of looked after children. This equates to about 100 additional children and young people coming into care, and has led inevitably to the increased use of expensive out-of-borough placements. Tonight's budget, as we've heard, will provide welcome investment of £10 million, which will enable us to invest in our social work establishment and ensure that we have the capacity to manage cases safely and effectively without relying on expensive agency staff. We will also invest in our own Wigan Borough-based provision for children in care, in line with our asset-based and care local approaches. In support of this, we are developing an improved offer for our foster carers. This means that the needs of more of our children in care can be met in a family situation within the borough. Also, in discussion with the young people themselves, the offer in our deal for care leavers is to be enhanced so that it's more effective in supporting our young adults into independent living and a secure, safe, healthy and happy long-term future. Mr. Mayor, our schools and colleges are looking forward to welcoming the return of pupils from next week. During the current lockdown, they have all remained open for vulnerable pupils and those of key workers. They have worked extremely hard to maintain COVID-safe environments and also to develop creative online programmes for pupils at home. We have seen very good levels of attendance, and there has been excellent partnership working to ensure that we have had sight of the most vulnerable pupils and have been able to offer the appropriate support. School budgets remain generally under pressure, but as you will have seen in the budget report this evening, the biggest concern is in the high needs block, which supports our children and young people with special educational needs and disability. We have increased the number of places where appropriate in some of our special schools, and we've worked closely with partners to provide additional places for behavioural needs. Our engagement centres continue to be effective in providing early intervention, outreach and support, so that pupils can remain on roll in their mainstream setting, but have high quality specialist support for part of the school week. We are investing in transformational resource units for some of our primary and secondary schools, which will provide high quality specialist education in an inclusive environment in our mainstream schools. Finally, Mr. Mayor, may I take this opportunity to thank everyone in our Children's Services Directorate for their truly exceptional hard work, dedication and kindness to our children, young people and families during this unprecedented year of the COVID pandemic. Team Wigan can be very proud. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mullen. We'll now move on to Councillor Halliwell. Councillor Halliwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Colleagues and members of the Council, as I have previously stated, we are experiencing a significant and unprecedented demand for council houses and affordable homes due to the impact of austerity, changes to the welfare system, a growth in insecure employment and a broken housing market. However, we have as a Labour Council over many years demonstrated our commitment to providing and maintaining a decency home standard for all our council tenants across the borough for many years. This year our commitment is no different. The Housing Revenue Account is proposing a capital programme of approximately £50 million, with the main items in the programme at £29.5 million for new build and regeneration programme, £1.4 million for improvement on the school's multi-storey blocks, £5.5 million for the kitchen replacement programme and £2.1 million for disabled adaptations and £1 million for carbon reduction measures. Indeed, this financial year we have delivered 96 homes. These include 31 homes for people with autism, including bungalows at Ullswater Road, Goulburn, 33 homes for people with autism comprising of independent living and bungalows at Hindane Lodge, Hindley, 12 general needs homes for older persons living with dementia at Etherstone in Lee, and 20 homes at Wagden House, Bryn for older persons with extra care. Next financial year, we are committed to providing a further 266 homes, and these can be summarised as follows: 17 general needs houses at the former Brackley House at Goose Green, 56 older persons homes with extra care at Wharfdale in Lee, 69 older persons extra care plus 18 bungalows at Sandalwood Drive in Beech Hill, 40 general needs apartments at the Railway Arches at Lee, 12 general needs older persons apartments at Standish, 32 supported living bungalows and general needs family houses at Pemberton, and 40 proposed extra care schemes at Shevington. As you can see, Mr. Mayor, we are distributing the homes across the borough. Mr Mayor, there's a further £5 million to be used to acquire housings across the borough for general needs to alleviate some of the pressures related to the current demand on the housing register. It is also worth remembering that on average about 7,500 existing council properties in the borough benefit from the cyclical maintenance improvement work, and this is an ongoing commitment this particular year. Mr Mayor, this is supported by continued investment in our properties, by investing in improvements in the multi-storey blocks, heating and boiler programme, sheltered housing, bathrooms and kitchens, environmental improvements and insulation schemes, including footway maintenance and disabled persons adaptations. Clearly, colleagues, we need a well-qualified workforce to deliver these improvements, and I can announce that in April it is our intention to employ 30 new apprentices across all trades to ensure we have the right workforce delivering these improvements. These apprentices will be local apprentices with a borough postcode, which demonstrates our commitment to invest in people from within our own communities. Mr Mayor, I'd like to turn to homelessness. As we all know, COVID has meant we have had to relocate many from the hubs that we established so that we could maintain social distancing, but they are still receiving the wraparound support to help them move forward with their lives. Last night was testament to this, whereby the Joint Confident Council and Places Committee were presented with a report that surprised the continued work with rough sleepers and homeless persons. What was clear from the meeting was the professionalism and dedication of our employees and the commitment demonstrated over the last couple of years, and in particular the last 12 months. Although we have seen a significant reduction in rough sleeping from 30 to 8, we know there is much to do, and there is much more to do, and our commitment for the future is supported by the plan to increase the support in independent living units by approximately 100 by using the Springboard Partnership, and we are also collaborating with an ethical letting agency to increase the options for rough sleepers to live independently. This couldn't be possible without our third sector partners, such as the Brick, Jigsaw, Riverside Housing Group and Your Housing Group, within council staff and the Mercury. May I now turn to welfare, Mr Mayor? Our welfare service and our third sector partners have continued to help those who find themselves in need, providing food parcels, debt advice, council reduction schemes, and recently provided school uniforms for eligible low-income families. Colleagues, none of this would have been possible without our third sector partners, such as the Unified Credit Union, CAB, the Break, Compassion in Action, and just a few I would name. But some of the improvements we've delivered and some of the initiatives we've delivered locally include, in October, for example, we supported families in receipt of free school meals with a uniform grant, totaling over 179k, and voucher food provision for October half term of 168k. We received our winter grant scheme allocation to support families with children, other vulnerable households and individuals in the winter months. In December and February half term, we paid $798,000 directly into customers' bank accounts for food provision and help towards the utility costs. An additional 129k has helped some of our most vulnerable residents with payments towards the cost of bedding and utilities, white goods and winter goods. Assessments continue to make housing benefits a priority to help support customers, with awards for housing benefits and council tax reductions being made as soon as we are able, ensuring bills and rent statements reflect liabilities as accurately as possible. Discretionary housing payments provide support for customers who help towards their rent, with 765k being paid to customers helping keep their tenancies sustainable. With new collection frameworks designed holistically, focusing on maximum income, awarding reductions, discounts and exemptions, and making affordable, sustainable payment arrangements with close relationships with our widening welfare offer. Opportunities are explored with customers with wider signposting to partner organisation and nationally accredited online services for free and impartial debt advice. With the suspension of recovery and evictions, early intervention is now more important, focusing on our customers' individual circumstances, providing support and creating payment opportunities. More than 50,000 support awards and payments through funding streams have been made, delivering the much needed support to our customers in these uncertain times. This budget that we're discussing here tonight will continue to work with our partners to ensure the welfare schemes and the funding streams are delivered to those that find themselves in need. The members of the council, none of these achievements will be possible without the dedication of our employees, the cooperation of third sector partners, and patience and understanding of our residents. As we now face yet more difficult times, we need the same collaboration whilst we plan and build for the future through difficult times, and ask members to endorse this budget. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Halliwell. We'll now move on to Councillor Prescott. The Councillor.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Council, since the declaration of a climate emergency on the 17th of July 2019, Wigan Council has worked tirelessly to mainstream the significance and key priority, as well as manage essential and critical service provision throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. We are all aware that climate change is not just a global challenge, it's also a local challenge that we all face. But in order to understand, plan and prepare for localised impacts to our borough, we need to implement those actions set out in our new climate change strategy as quickly as possible. During the development of the strategy, we identified that various areas of work needed to be developed in order for us to successfully reach carbon neutrality by 2038 or sooner. 6 climate change action themes have been identified that include our air quality and transport, our resilience and adaptation, our sustainability and consumption, our built environment, our natural environment, and our communities and well-being. Each action theme now has a dedicated working group, and the current short-term aim is to create an action plan for each theme that will guide delivery of each area of work over the next 5 years. Working groups are well established and include officers from across the authority, collaborating to drive sustainable service provision to support the future-proofing of our borough. During the past 12 months, and despite the huge pressures on our council services, the climate and environmental agenda has progressed rapidly. The council have been successful in securing external funding that has the overall aim to lower carbon emissions, increase energy efficiency and sustainability, and lower costs in the mid-long term. Through a Greater Manchester bid to the National Green Homes Grant, we have secured £150,000 funding to support the installation of 30 air source heating systems, which offer social housing tenants an alternative to burning polluting coal and other solid fuels. We have also secured £500,000 grant funding to support the installation of 150 solar PV systems with battery storage. This will also help tackle the issue of fuel poverty, which some of our council tenants are really struggling with. Immediate improvements for the technology include increased energy efficiency, helping to reduce tenants' energy bills, and therefore positively impacting financially and on tenants' health well-being. We're also investing an additional £1 million annually into council housing stock to help reduce carbon emissions and to improve our tenants' quality of life. A number of our public sector buildings have also been targeted for decarbonisation to improve energy efficiency and install renewable technologies. Makerfield Depot is one of our flagship sites for carbon neutrality and will benefit from solar PV panels, electric vehicle charging points, as well as LED lighting and other efficiencies as part of the Greater Manchester Unlocking Clean Energy ERDF programme. Wigan Council also recently applied for the Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme as part of a wider Greater Manchester bid that will support the decarbonisation of a number of buildings, including Lee Sports Village, Howbridge Leisure Centre, Hope School, and Turnpike Centre, and our Makerfield Depot. Measures include the installation of solar PV panels, energy efficient lighting windows. We are transitioning to a proactive approach to bid for funding for large-scale projects, ensuring that Wigan Borough has constant access to all methods to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from buildings and infrastructure, as well as providing a wealth of financial and health co-benefits to both our staff and our residents. Our approach to the recovery from the pandemic must be green, sustainable, to ensure that we do not return to business as usual, as more importantly, it is fully inclusive and we do not leave anyone behind. A future local economy that is sustainable has wide-ranging benefits that go far beyond economic positives, and the Council is committed to supporting that transformation to a localised green economy through the approach of community wealth building. The Council is dedicated to investing in new skills and apprenticeships, particularly in areas that require green skills such as tradespeople, surveyors, technicians and engineers, but also marketing, communication and engagement. Our services such as property maintenance will need skills in the development of renewable energy technologies, requiring green skilled workers to install, maintain and educate on such technologies. Our projects surrounding the Green Homes Grant and Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme both include community wealth building elements with commitments to creating new local job opportunities, widening the market and demand for people with skills in these areas. The pandemic has been a huge struggle for many people. However, we also need to acknowledge the widespread environmental benefits and sustainable behavioural change we have witnessed across the borough. Many people have positively reported getting back out into nature, taking part in more active forms of travel, and building up a long forgotten community spirit. To ensure the people of Wigan Borough are taking responsibility alongside the Council for their part in tackling the climate emergency, we will commit to normalise these positive and sustainable behaviours, that to do so much more across the borough. We are witnessing a huge increase in community pride and environmental enthusiasm to do our bit, which runs in parallel with the aims of the Deal 2030. We have harnessed this energy in areas such as litter and recycling, with over 300 litter pickers and kit distributed over the past few months to local volunteers who have worked tirelessly and COVID safe to look after the local environment. Even with the stress of the pandemic, many people are now moving away from car travel, preferring to walk or cycle, and we've received much support for the development of our walking and cycling networks. Electric vehicles are becoming more prominent as the eco-friendly alternative to petrol and diesel cars. And with the £100,000 recently pledged by the leader, we will aim to install many more EV charging points across the borough once demand has been analysed. We are also exploring options to offer free town centre parking to all local residents who drive fully electric vehicles. Our commitment to protecting our natural environment and green spaces across the borough is inherent to the Deal 2030, and we've seen huge steps taken to further preserve these environments. In many locations, we are allowing nature to take control, revitalising previously unused spaces and creating biodiversity havens across the borough, with the planting of wildflower meadows bringing important pollinators back to local communities. As part of the Naturalising the Borough project and our pledge to plant 1 million new trees by 2030, we've made an encouraging start. We have now planted approximately 70,000 trees by the end of the financial year, with around a further 26,000 trees to be planted in partnership with City of Trees. Wigan Council will also pledge to plant a tree in memory of every citizen who has sadly passed from coronavirus, ensuring that these lives are remembered through the beauty of nature. We are also working with the Carbon Landscape Partnership to raise awareness and protection of the peatland and wetland environments that form part of the Manchester Mosslands in the south of our borough. Our communities have been heavily engaged in this area through volunteering and environmental protection, and understanding the importance of native species, grassland, tree planting and peat bogs as carbon sinks and thriving ecosystems. We have beautiful landscapes and valuable environments across all corners of Wigan Borough, and we will continue to celebrate and preserve these areas along with our communities. Community conservations on climate change and environmental improvements need to become the norm, and that's why we are building up a suite of engagement education and communication campaigns to begin mainstreaming the conversation. We will be designing a big green conversation to take across the borough, similar to the successful rollout of the Big Listening project, in order to reinvigorate our relationship with local communities on this significant priority. A citizens' assembly on climate change is likely to be a highly valuable and much needed exercise for Wigan Council to provide a voice to our local communities on climate emergency decision making. We are also planning an anniversary event to mark Climate Change Emergency Declaration in July, alongside an event in November to coincide with the United Nations 26th Conference of the Parties COP26, where global states will negotiate their commitments on climate change in Glasgow. Looking forward to the future, the Council plans to invest further in resources to focus on engagement across our communities, businesses, and most significantly, education. Promoting the green recovery and the wider importance of climate action is a huge issue for our young people, who are becoming the pioneers for sustainability that require much needed guidance from the Council to ensure that they have a clear voice in all decisions. Our Wigan Youth Cabinet are a key stakeholder in the implementation of our climate change strategy, with two of our young people holding coveted positions of climate change youth leaders working with the British Youth Council and Greenpeace. Education also is key to support and encourage the sustainable behaviours we have witnessed during lockdown, and the Council is committed to providing climate literacy training for all internal staff and partners, with a vision to provide resources for communities across the borough. Businesses too have a huge role to play, both in terms of physical infrastructure, changes and alterations to working practices, but they need guidance and support, both in terms of cost benefit and resilience in the face of threats to business continuity. With the above in mind, Wigan Council will aim to create a collaborative partnership across the borough, comprising anchor institutes, emergency services, public health, educational establishments and VCSE sector, businesses, environmental community and faith groups. This will bring our community to become carbon neutral by 2038 to the forefront of the borough, wide thinking and alongside community wealth building, and the Deal 2030 principles will support in the sustainability transformation of the borough and prevent the worst impacts of climate change. Council officers and elected members need to spearhead this transition and operate in the community as green champions, ensuring everyone is playing their part in safeguarding the environment, the local economy and our health. We only have one planet, which we depend on for everything in our lives. Wigan Borough has seen many transformations over the past 100 years, and we need to journey as quickly as possible towards a sustainable transformation. This is only possible through the actions of every resident, community, businesses and organisation across the borough, as we need to commit to protect our future together. Mr. Mayor, the clock has not stopped ticking, and in this game, there is no extra time. Now is the time for all of us to come together with the same spirit and determination that we have shown in tackling the current pandemic. Our world leaders need to stand up and be counted. Our country's leaders need to stand up and be counted. Our businesses and manufacturers need to stand up and be counted. And every one of us, as responsible human beings, need to stand up and be counted. It is true to say that we are all in this together. If not for yourselves, let's make a pledge to do this for our young people and our future generations. Now is the time we start to live in a way that repairs our planet, not in the current one, which is slowly destroying it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Prescott. We'll now move on to Councillor Reader. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and this definitely is the graveyard slot, isn't it? Mr. Mayor, what our residents need at these times of uncertainty is good news, and my cabinet colleagues have given that in abundance, so I will continue on that vein. There are so many areas to my portfolio, I just want to focus on a couple. The new Community Recovery Fund, which the leader has announced, will be a massive step in helping our communities to recover from COVID-19 and the terrible 12 months we have all endured. So we're investing £2 million into the people who have helped us through this terrible period. Our community groups, our workforce and our volunteers, to name just a few, who have been instrumental in getting us through this period. And this is mainly through the investment that we have put in our groups through the Community Investment Fund over the last 10 years. And I must pay tribute to Lord Peter Smith for his forward thinking on this project all those years ago. And now we're bearing that fruit. The Community Recovery Fund will touch all parts of our communities in the coming year. And I will touch on that later on in different council meetings as the year evolves. But I want to focus on the here and now. We have worked with our groups over the past 12 months, from football teams to brownies to our OAP groups who have not met for over a year, with no funds coming in, i.e. the subs from members, but still have outgoing payments to put up with. So what I will be doing in this budget, Mr. Mayor, I will put in a pot of money which groups can apply for, with a simple quick turnaround period to help get groups back on their feet, get people meeting again, and hopefully getting back to normal. This fund will be for all our residents, young and old, and will be promoted by all of us, including all of us in this chamber, and including our SDF and communities teams who have done an excellent job over the past 12 months, pulling all services together. I think it's really shown that Wigan has come together through the pandemic and done an excellent job. And I've got to commend all members in this house who have actually done that work as well. And it's been really fruitful. So I want to thank you for that. Mr. Mayor, I'm going to take this opportunity to squash a few myths that have been flying around. Firstly, there is only one fire within, and there won't be a new one for Lee. The one we've got covers the whole borough. The fire within is a borough-wide organisation, not just one which people think is in the galleries. The Fire Within is part of the cultural strategy, which has been one of the most successful ones we have ever done, and is seen nationally as the way forward in culture, and is being talked about in all quarters of the country. Culture is far more than museums and galleries. It's about all our activities and communities. And really, we should all look at that and not just be siloed into what we think culture is. We've invested $250,000 in 2019, and this is a 5-year funding. And I've got to illustrate that. and this to date in funding directly and indirectly to our residents has brought in 3.2 million, and there's more in the pot which we could be getting. If anybody has been listening to the budget, and I've listened to it briefly in the government are investing heavily in culture to the tune of billions, because they see this is the way of revitalising the community and the infrastructure and businesses. So, Mr. Mayor, the saying goes, don't let the facts get in the way of a good story. But the true facts are that the Fire Within gets £50,000 per year over the next 5 years, and and we will reap in excess of £1 million per year.
Sorry, I have a point of order. Councillor Jones.
Hello, Mr. Mayor. I can actually back this one up 100%. That's a mistruth. And that because I've got the email, as well as Councillor Watson has, when we questioned this, when one of your other councillors stated the next 5 years, off Paul McKevitt, we double checked, this budget is for 12 months, in which you will be spending, yes it is, £250,000 for build costs in Lee for a second Fire Within. Now that is coming from Paul McKevitt, who I truly believe a lot more than I believe you, Councillor Reader. It's not for the next 5 years. This isn't a 5-year budget. It's a 12-month budget. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Right, Mr. Mayor, I'll probably answer that question then to a certain degree. And when I started off the speech by saying there won't be a Fire Within budget in Lee, and I think that's what Councillor Jones is referring to. The £250,000 is capital funding for Lee Town Hall. Whether there's been a bit miscrewed here with calling it the Fire Within or whatever, but I can clearly tell you, and whatever Paul McKevitt's told you, that is what the cost is. It is for capital funding for Lee Town Hall. So you can actually chase that back up, and actually this is on record now what I'm saying. So, and I'll go back to what I said. Don't let the facts get in the way. The Fire Within is a 5-year funded programme.
Sorry, Councillor, I have a point of order.
What is this? Is it a capital funding, or is it the Fire Within? You've changed the point of it twice now. I mean, this is a point of order because you're going on about facts and figures. You need to get your own right, Councillor Reedy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I think Councillor Maiden, Councillor Jones was saying it was a 1 year. Councillor Reid is saying he thinks he's mistaken on that. In that's the capital for the town hall, or is the budget for the town hall. Mr.
Is it a Fire Within, or is it a 5-year budget? It's a 1 year budget. We've done a full 360 in 2 seconds here.
Yes. Councillor Reid has stated on record now that it is a 5-year programme, £50,000 a year, totalling 250,000. Is that correct, Councillor Reid?
That's correct.
That's a matter of the public record.
It is, and what I would probably say to Councillor Jones is where he's quoting £250,000.
Sorry, can I just interrupt you there again? Can Mr. McKevitt clarify this for us, please? Mr. McKevitt, are you there?
Yeah, thanks. Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, there's an entry in the capital programme. There's a new entry for 250,000, and the description is Fire Within Lee. So it'll be capital works. It might be in the town hall, but that's the description in the council's capital programme that's being considered tonight. So I hope that clarifies what it may be spent on. May differ, but that's the entry that's in the capital programme report that Councillor are considering this evening. I can confirm that.
Thank you, Mr. McKevitt.
So can I have a retraction there, because it's 12 months and it's the Fire Within, even though you said it wasn't?
No, the Fire Within is a 5-year period of 250,000, one payment. What Councillor McKevitt's referring to is capital funding, which it's been put under
which comes under the Fire Within.
Are you going to let me finish, or just get interrupted, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, if you can lie straight, yeah.
Councillor Maiden, it's for me. The point of order has been clarified by Mr. McKevitt, and we're just going to have to accept that for now. Councillor Reid has put on record exactly what he's saying.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We'll continue. Councillor Reader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll go back to what I was saying, that the fire within is £250,000 over a 5-year period, and that's the fire within across the borough. And that will reap us probably in the excess of £1 million per year in extra funding. I'm not a mathematician, but I think that is a very good return. And I want to pay credit to Leslie O'Halloran and her team and all the volunteers for the work that they've done on the cultural strategy. Mr. Mayor, can I make a request really to members, and especially some members who've made comments tonight about and this stuff on social media? And what I would like people to do is restrict from naming people and treating people with disrespect to volunteers in our community, and treat them with kindness. And just think about something. If people was talking about your family and your friends the way that sometimes you treat people, would you like it? Mr. Mayor, I finished there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Reader. Can I now ask, are these recommendations seconded?
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you wish to speak now on your second, or would you rather leave it till later in the debate?
I would leave it to later.
Thank you. We have received an amendment to the leader's motion prior to the 12 p.m. deadline today from Councillor Jones, which has been seconded by Councillor Watts. Can I hold you there for a minute, Mr. Jones? I have Councillor Winstanley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I was under the impression that the two leaders of the opposition groups had 10 minutes to respond to the presentation that we've just heard before we move on to the amendments. I'm just double checking that's correct.
I'm told we do the amendments and then we go back to the 10 minutes afterwards when it's being debated. So we're going to the first amendment from Councillor Jones. Can I ask Mr. McKevitt, is this a balanced budget?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I can confirm that the amendment submitted by Councillor Jones can be fitted in within the budget that's been submitted tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, could you introduce your amendment, please? And you have up to 5 minutes to speak. I'm not getting anything from this end, Mr. Oh, sorry, you're back on there, Mr. Jones.
Due to the pandemic last year, Mr. Mayor, no fault of our highways and green spaces staff, we lost up to 6 months of our green spaces being maintained and cut. We also lost a full year of our footpaths, alleyways being weeded and cleaned of litter. It was a common sight to see overflowing street bins all around our town and wards, and there was drastic increase in fly tipping. Many of our vulnerable residents living in council properties were lucky if they got one grass cut a year. This was a time when spending just 1 hour in their garden was one of the only happiness they were allowed. Let us not forget the impact this had on our residents' mental health. Bearing in mind the immense challenges that we all faced, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the council's officers and staff for all their great work, especially the frontline workers under Paul Barton and his environmental and green spaces team, who do a fantastic job, Mr. Mayor. Over the past few years, we've seen their numbers cut through no fault of their own, and with this reduced manpower, their jobs have been made near impossible. Yet they work tirelessly to keep our borough looking the best they can. This benefits all residents and helps improve their mental health. Their daily tasks have become what now have become near impossible. For all the good work, they have been punished with further budget cuts. It's now time for this council to show our workers and residents the support they need and get back to business. That is why I ask you today, instead of spending £250,000 on build costs for a second, Mr. Mayor, fire within in Lee, to instead put this money where it's needed. We all understand the importance of culture, but in these challenging times we must focus on the basics, which is why I urge all members to support this amendment. Let's use the money to enable our staff to get back on top of the jobs that most matter to our community. Our residents want to see us get the basics right. They want to see the parks cut, the bins emptied, the alleys and footpaths weeded and cleaned of litter. These small gestures will go a long way into restoring confidence while improving the happiness of our residents. But Mr. Mayor, our staff can't do this alone unless we here give them the support and money needed. I ask you this, is the fire within essential? Is it good value for money? Considering we've already spent hundreds of thousands of pounds on a project in Wigan that is near unheard of by residents, and let's forget how controversial its artwork is and who, if anyone, it benefits. In making your decision on this amendment, Mr. Mayor, consider what is, well, not you considering making your decision, Mr. Mayor, sorry, consider what it is that your residents will ask you to do, not the council's powers to be or your own party leadership, but the people who elect you to represent them here today. We cannot claim hard times and residents need to buckle up and then use their money like a game of Monopoly while putting their biggest concerns second. Mr. Mayor, tonight we have heard nothing in extra support to our frontline workers, and that's what I want to give them today. So in closing, Mr. Mayor, let's get back to basics and get our town back looking the way it should. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Is this amendment seconded?
It is seconded, Mr. Mayor.
Right.
And if I may, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to speak on this as well.
Yes, I was going to say, would you like to speak on this? You have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I refer to page 155 of the publications pack, where it specifically says the fire within Lee £250,000. Now, Mr. Mayor, I'm a big fan of culture. I even went to the opera once. Now, culture is important, but at what cost? And who will actually benefit from this project in Lee? We're in unprecedented times and we've got an annual loss of GDP of 9.9%. That's the lowest in over 300 years. So should we be actually investing in culture right now, or should we be focusing back on the basics? So I asked a question, who will actually benefit from this? Perhaps the low-income families, perhaps not, when you bear in mind the social rent increases, the proposed council tax increase of 3.9%, the mayoral preset increases, energy increases of between 3 and 9%, and this is what we know of so far. So considering this, I asked a question, will the lower income families benefit from this, or will they even be able to afford to travel to a fire within in Lee? Let us not forget that there'll be inevitable increases to travel costs, especially public transport due to the Greater Manchester Clean Air Plan. So yet again, I asked a question, who can afford it and who will benefit from it? The low income families? I think not. Then there's the financial uncertainty surrounding Brexit and of course the impact of COVID-19 to consider, and this will inevitably force up food prices. Now, what the pandemic has actually shown us is that daily walks and local exercise has improved the mental well-being of all of our residents. Now, I for one would like to continue to build on this positive outcome from the pandemic, as the demand for mental health services has skyrocketed throughout it, especially amongst our young people. It'll be the little things that matter most to our residents in the immediate future, and by supporting this amendment and investing this £250,000 into green spaces, this will have a more significant and positive impact on our residents' lives than a short-lived 12-month art exhibition. So I'd ask you all to put aside party politics. Let's prioritise all of our residents' well-being and support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Leader, do you accept the amendment to your motion?
No, Mr. Mayor.
You have 5 minutes. No, that's right. No. I will now move to the vote on Councillor Jones's amendment. The Chief Executive.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, did you not want me to speak on it?
Oh, sorry.
because I think when members actually make the effort and put an amendment in, at least you should respond back to it. And can I thank Councillor Jones and Councillor Watson for actually submitting an amendment, and I'll also thank them for the delivery and what they've said. But can I just firstly say to Councillor Jones, the big thing we're doing, we are protecting our workforce. We've made that commitment tonight. There'll be no job losses. We've made that commitment tonight. There'll be no cuts to services. We've made that commitment tonight that we're going to create 100 apprenticeships. So I think there's a big commitment that we are doing in terms of protecting our workforce, ensuring that our workforce is strong enough to deliver the services that we need to deliver. And certainly there have been challenging times over this last 12 months. But once again, our workforce stepped up to it. And I'm certainly not going to abandon them now, because I think it's so important that we do maintain our services. And I think you've heard tonight from Councillor Prescott's presentation, the amount of effort and the amount of funding we're putting into green spaces in terms of what we want to see within this borough. Can I also just say on the fire within, culture is something that some people don't always understand. But what we do know, by doing the fire within, we are supporting young artists, young musicians, young writers, young performers. These people don't all come from backgrounds of a silver spoon in the mouth. These are working class young people who want to make a way and a life within the culture sector. And we are supporting that. We think it's most important that we support the ambitions and certainly the talented young people that we have in this borough. So I am not going to accept the amendment, because I do think the funding and support we give to culture is really important. And actually, the Chancellor today said it's significantly important in terms of building back this economy in this country. So, Mr. Mayor, I'll apologise in some respects because I'm not accepting your amendment, Councillor Jones or Councillor Watson, and I'm quite happy now to move to the vote. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I have a point of order. I have a point of order from Councillor Jones. Councillor Jones.
Please accept my apologies if I'm wrong, but how can we not have a debate but the leader can come back and summarise? And now, I know you might say it got passed 2 or 3 years ago. Listen, we adopt a constitution. I can't put in the constitution you can kill somebody in the town hall and it makes it legal. We've still got to follow some guidelines. This isn't democracy. And I know he's meeting with the Chinese government, and I'm starting to wonder who's advising who won't be a dictatorship. We need to have debate in this place, not all set for the controlling party, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor, the rules are there's no debate.
He's just debated.
There's motion.
He's just debated.
We're not debating anything yet. We'll go to the debate later on.
The leader's just had 5 minutes to come back at my amendment, but no other member has. I'm going to leave it there because I know you.
No, you're making the amendment on his motion.
Yeah, and he's just had 5 minutes to speak about my amendment.
He's had 5 minutes to say why he's not accepting it.
Mr. Mayor, you're doing a very good job at pretending that you agree with it. Thank you very much.
That's not a point of order. Right, we'll now move on to the vote for Councillor Jones's amendment. The Chief Executive will now read through an alphabetical list of members' names. When your name is read out, you will simply need to unmute to confirm whether you are for, against, or abstain in relation to the vote, and then mute yourself again when everyone has voted. I will then declare the result of the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll go through the list. We've had the vote from the leader, so the next person is you, Mr. Mayor.
I'll be voting against this amendment.
Deputy Mayor?
Against.
Councillor Aldred?
Against.
Councillor Anderson?
Against.
Councillor Anderton?
Against.
Councillor Blay?
Against.
Councillor Brielle?
For.
Councillor Brown?
Abstain.
Councillor Bullen?
Against.
Councillor Collins.
It's Councillor Collinson, actually. Is it me?
No, you're next, Councillor Collinson. I'll move on from Councillor Collins and go to Councillor Collinson.
4.
Councillor Conway.
Against.
Councillor Cullen.
Against.
Councillor Cunliffe.
Against.
Councillor Davis.
Against.
Councillor Dewhurst.
Against.
Councillor Draper.
Against.
Councillor Ellis.
4.
Councillor Evans.
Abstain.
Councillor Gambles.
Against.
Councillor Gerard.
4.
Councillor Greensmith.
Against.
Councillor Halliwell.
Against.
Councillor Harding.
Against.
Councillor Hellier.
Against.
Councillor Hilton.
Against.
Councillor Hodgkinson.
4.
Councillor Holland.
Against.
Councillor Edward Hulton.
Abstain.
Councillor Kath Hulton.
Abstain.
Councillor Hunt.
Against.
Councillor Jones.
4.
Councillor Kelly. Councillor Kenny.
Against.
Councillor Cleave.
Against.
Councillor Maiden.
4.
Councillor Marsh.
Abstain.
Councillor Marshall.
Against.
Councillor Merritt.
Against.
Councillor Moody.
Against.
Councillor Morgan. Clive. Sorry.
Against.
Councillor Marie Morgan.
Against.
Councillor O'Brien.
Against.
Councillor Parkinson.
Against.
Councillor Jeanette Prescott.
Against.
Councillor Paul Prescott.
Against.
Councillor Ramsdale.
Against.
Councillor Reedy.
Against.
Councillor Raymond.
Against.
Councillor Charles Rigby.
Against.
Councillor Eileen Rigby. Councillor Eileen Rigby. Councillor Roberts.
Against.
Councillor Rotherham.
Against.
Councillor Sharrett.
Against.
Councillor Eunice Smethurst.
Against.
Councillor Martin Smethurst.
Against.
Councillor Smith.
Mr. Mayor, I've been advised to put a personal interest in this matter, so I'll abstain.
Councillor Sweeney.
Against.
Councillor Sykes.
Against.
Councillor Talbot.
Against.
Councillor Taylor.
Against.
Councillor Thorpe.
Against.
Councillor Vickers.
Against.
Councillor Wales.
Against.
Councillor Wakefield.
Against.
Councillor Walker.
Against.
Councillor Watson.
4.
Councillor Whittam.
Against.
Councillor Whittingham.
Abstain.
Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Wilkinson.
4.
Councillor Winston. Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Thank you, Councillor Winstanley.
Abstain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That comes to the end of the recorded vote.
Right, I'll just get the numbers. I think it's against. There we go. bear with us. The results are 4, 9, against, 52, abstain, 8. So that amendment fails. We have also received an amendment to the leader's motion prior to the 12 p.m. deadline today from Councillor Brielle, which has been seconded by Councillor Maiden. Mr. McKevitt, is this a balanced budget?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I can confirm that the amendment submitted does present us with a balanced budget if accepted. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brielle, could you introduce your amendment, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a bit confused about this being called an amendment. This is funding what is much needed to be spent from the council tax contributions of England Green Ward, £5 million. So it doesn't affect any cuts made by government with the grants of 160 million made by Councillor Cunliffe. This is funding available for works needed to carry out in my ward or much needed services, i.e. To keep our streets clean. We're looking for a push street cleaner, an employee, obviously. £1 million to be set aside for a community centre on council-owned land within England Green. Funding for speed ramps on Camborne Drive, Colwyn Drive, which is much needed because the residents are really upset that somebody's going to get killed because of the speeding curse. Again, at Ashwith Road, again, speeding cars around that. They desperately need to calm this traffic down. Funding for new drains and road service on adopted standard at Hurley Avenue, plus repairs to the junction Beacon Drive and Beaumaris Road, usually known as Corpit Lane. Now this, in the past, when this council was funding unadopted roads, bringing them up to standards, we was next on the list, but again, unfortunately, funding ran out, as the usual case is. Well, like I said, the funding is there this time. It's coming from the council tax contributions. Funding for new drop curbs and tarmac both footpaths at Laurel Crescent. The state of the footpaths and the curbs for this. Request for new benches, new notice board and a dog fenced off area at Westlake. Again, listening to residents, they need funding for this type of thing. It was in place, but obviously some officers has decided to overrule 2 elected councillors after, information, and it was set in place with funding available given to us by Tony Clark. Obviously that's wrong as well. List of new grip bins, locations for health and safety of residents in the winter conditions. Obviously there's 22 yellow grip bins, which are much needed, which matches the criteria.
Sorry to interrupt you, Councillor. I have a point of order. Councillor Hunt.
Yes, Chair. This isn't a balanced budget for the borough. This is a party political election broadcast for Bob's election, and he shouldn't be allowed.
Yeah, sorry.
Absolute rubbish. This is not, clearly not, an attempt to balance of the budget.
Councillor, I did ask Mr. McKevitt whether this is a balanced budget, and he agreed that it was. So you're just going to have to accept that. That's not a point of order. Continue, Councillor Brielle.
Got a point of order now, Councillor. Am I on now?
Yes, continue, Councillor.
Just to answer Councillor Hunt there, we have got an obligation as councillors to make the executive accountable, and to set terms and conditions for spending in our ward. Obviously, he doesn't know that, being a councillor for Labour. They just seem to snap their fingers and the budget's there. Anyway, I'll carry on. Anyway, the 22 yellow grip bins all match the criteria for the winter months. And why can a street not have a grip bin at a cost of £100 to safeguard the weather conditions, stop crashes, stop injuries, stopping deaths? So I think what Mr. Hunt is saying here, Councillor Hunt, is absolutely out of order. Anyway, we're requesting all the Christmas lights in Ingley Green for the township funding next year of £10,000. What's the switch code cost? I don't know, 50 quid, whatever. So the lighting columns. And the request for 12 new rubbish bins at locations of any councillor's request. Not that I'm requesting these bins because there's always a shortage of bins. Right. Funding available for all potholes and damaged roads within the green. Again, this is essential, this, because everybody's sick of this. And the criteria has gone from 25 mil to 40 mil when the only top surface is 25 mil. There's some blagging going on here. And a request for a suitable location for a youth club. That's the Old Castle Youth Club, which is on the site of Mornington Road Leisure Centre, to be given back to the kids.
Councillor, I'm afraid you've run out of time.
Hang on, have you been timing that?
Yeah, 5 minutes.
I'll take 10.
No,
I'll take 10 minutes. Okay then, I'll sum up after.
Councillor Maiden, is the amendment seconded?
Yes, the amendment seconded, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, and would you like to speak on the amendment, Councillor?
Yeah, I'll keep it brief because I realise there's a lot of time left behind me. Bob's more or less covered all that. The main push for Ingley Green is a community centre, budget of around £1 million, probably give or take 100,000. But our population is getting older. There are a lot of new families moving into Ingley Green. We've seen a lot of houses building. You can get into the politics, is that the Tory or Labour's fault? I won't do that. Fact of the matter is there's more people living in Ingley Green. We don't even have a council asset to transfer over. So we need something building with these new people coming to Ingley Green and the population growing. It's an elderly population and it's a young population as well. So we believe a community centre would cater for that. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll cut my time short while time is of the essence.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Maiden. Leader, do you accept the amendment to your motion?
Sorry, no, Mr. Mayor.
You want to answer?
Yeah, it'll be very brief, but can I first of all thank Councillor Brielle and Councillor Maiden for actually taking the time and putting all this together. But obviously, it's a shopping list. It doesn't comply with what we normally discuss at a budget meeting in some respects. When can I just say that if we provide 5 million for Ingley Green and I'll provide 5 million for all the other 24 wards, that would give me a cost of 125 million. And I think perhaps then we wouldn't be talking about a balanced budget, and we might not even be talking about being financially secure as a council. So as much as I thank him for his efforts on this one, Mr. Mayor, I don't accept the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mullenix. I will now move to the vote on Councillor Brielle's amendment. Once again, sorry, I have a point of order. I don't know who it's off. Oh, Councillor Brielle.
Yeah, a point of order, Mr. Mayor. I'm not asking for £5 million, as Councillor Mullins is saying he's going to give us. It's coming from the council taxpayers of Ingley Green, the residents, at which I'm one of them. I mean, it's money that I pay into the pot, and so does 10,000 other residents of the ward. So I think it's a bit rich saying I'm asking him for £5 million when we're only asking for £1.5 million out the £5 million, which is already generated for the ward to repair and service the ward with the list I've put in. Order is very rich.
That's not a point of order, Councillor.
Yeah, it is.
No, it isn't. I'll now move on to the vote on Councillor Brielle's amendment. Once again, the Chief Executive will now read through an alphabetical list of members' names. When your name is read out, you will simply need to unmute to confirm whether you are for, against, or abstain in relation to the vote, and then mute yourself again once everyone has voted. I will then declare the result of the vote. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recorded vote. We've had the vote from the leader, so I'll now move on. Mr. Mayor, your vote?
Against.
Deputy Mayor?
Against.
Councillor Aldred?
Against.
Councillor Anderson?
Against.
Councillor Anderton?
Against.
Councillor Blay?
Against.
Councillor Brielle?
For.
Councillor Brown?
Against.
Councillor Bullen?
Against.
Councillor Collins?
Against.
Councillor Collinson?
For.
Councillor Conway?
Against.
Councillor Clark? Sorry, not Councillor Clark, moving on. Councillor Cullen?
Against.
Councillor Cunliffe?
Against.
Councillor Davis?
Against.
Councillor Dewhurst?
Against.
Councillor Draper?
Against.
Councillor Ellis?
For.
Councillor Evans?
Abstain.
Councillor Gambles?
Against.
Councillor Gerard?
For.
Councillor Greensmith?
Against.
Councillor Halliwell?
Against.
Councillor Harding?
Against.
Councillor Hellier?
Against.
Councillor Hilton?
Against.
Councillor Hodgkinson?
For.
Councillor Holland?
Against.
Councillor Edward Hulton?
Abstain.
Councillor Kath Hulton?
Abstain.
Councillor Hunt?
Emphatically against.
Councillor Jones?
For.
Councillor Kelly? Councillor Kelly? Councillor Kenny?
Against.
Councillor Cleave?
Against.
Councillor Maiden?
Categorically electioneering for.
Councillor Marsh?
Abstain.
Councillor Marshall?
Against.
Councillor Merritt?
Against.
Councillor Moody?
Against.
Councillor Clive Morgan?
Against.
Councillor Marie Morgan?
Against.
Councillor O'Brien?
Against.
Councillor Parkinson?
Against.
Councillor Jeanette Prescott? Councillor Paul Prescott?
Against.
Councillor Ramsdale?
Against.
Councillor Reedy?
Against.
Councillor Raymond?
Against.
Councillor Charles Rigby?
Against.
Councillor Eileen Rigby?
Against.
Councillor Roberts?
Against.
Councillor Rotherham?
Against.
Councillor Sharrett?
Against.
Councillor Eunice Smethurst?
Against.
Councillor Martin Smethurst?
Against.
Councillor Smith?
Against.
Councillor Sweeney?
Against.
Councillor Sykes?
Against.
Councillor Talbot,
Most definitely against.
Councillor Taylor,
Against.
Councillor Thorpe,
Against.
Councillor Vickers,
For.
Councillor Wales,
Against.
Councillor Wakefield, Councillor Wakefield,
Against.
Councillor Walker,
For. Sorry, against. I've got mixed up there.
Nice one, Fred.
Yeah, just testing you.
Councillor Watson,
For.
Councillor Whittam,
Against.
Councillor Whittingham,
Abstain.
Councillor Wilkinson,
For.
Councillor Michael Winstanley.
Abstain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That concludes the recorded vote.
Right, thank you. Just collect and I'll get you the numbers. Right, the results are for 10, against 55, abstentions 6. So that amendment fails. We have received a third amendment to the leader's motion prior to the 12 p.m. deadline today from Councillor Gerard, which has been seconded by Councillor Hodgkinson. Mr. McKevitt, is this a balanced budget?
I can confirm that the amendments suggested by Councillor Gerard leave us with a balanced budget if accepted. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gerard, could you introduce your amendment, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to start off by thanking the officers for delivering a balanced budget tonight. But I would like to make a few amendments to it if possible. We have seen over the years lots of investment in Wigan Town Centre and also, to a lesser extent, Leigh Town Centre. Totally forgetting about all the rest of the outlying towns and not giving significant investment in those towns to allow them to regenerate, grow and make more prosperous. Just one second. On the report, it even mentions how much investment over the years Wigan Town Centre has had. That's on part 11, the Town Centre Strategic Regeneration Framework. And it states on 11.2, significant capital investment has already taken place or is underway to drive the agenda, including substantial investment in facilities at Wigan Life Centre, the Believe Square, Wigan Bus Station, but despite this, further capital investment is required for growth and employment in key sectors, including retail, residential and commercial. Now, I agree with that, but it's part of the council's own doing. They've allowed out-of-town retail parks to be built so close to the town centres in Wigan and Leigh, and this has caused businesses to go out of the town centre into the retail parks, and the customers following suit. And now we're throwing good money into these town centres to try and attract them back, and that is not good enough, especially when we're not investing in the other town centres. So basically, my first amendment is to scale back the £47 million proposed for the galleries. Now, on the amendment, it said 10 million. I want to just scale it back by £7 million and put that money, that's £7 million into the Our Town fund, so we can actually start to grow the whole borough as one and make sure the whole borough grows together. So this affects councillors from all wards. It's not political. You're here representing your constituents, and we need to boost employment in our own towns, what we represent. Not Wigan Town Centre, which is just a minority of voters, but the whole borough. And we need to do that quick before they get left behind even further than what they already are. My second amendment is about the new homes bonus. Now, in the budget presented tonight, it's not in there because it's currently under consultation and has been from the 10th of February and is running for 8 weeks. I urge all councillors to go on to the consultation, fill it in, answer the 30 questions and promote this to your constituents and to see where they want this money spent. Because the new homes bonus since 2010 has cost over £10 million, or we've received over £10 million. But this has only been spent on junctions, road junctions, when it's supposed to be sent on the community and community facilities. So I'm proposing that whatever the new scheme is announced after this consultation period, is that money what's raised from the new homes bonus, which in towns such as Atherton, Lee and Tilsley is quite a lot, because we're taking the brunt of the new homes build. We're losing our green belt over it, and it's only right that those towns take that money, what's been generated from the new scheme, and put back into our community. Let's have community centres back, civic halls back. Let's get our towns moving rather than just one or two. We're here for the many, not just for the few, which is what Labour Council is representing at the moment. Just one or two towns. We represent much more than that, and the borough is a lot more than that. And together, we should be growing together, not just by one or two. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gerard. Is the amendment seconded?
Seconded, Mr. Mayor.
Would you like to speak on the amendment, Councillor Hodgkinson?
I would. I think Councillor Gerard has covered everything I was going to say, but I just want to bring up, obviously, Section 106 monies that are being used for affordable housing, that when they get sold on, all the money from the sale will be accumulated for the, by the council to be spent locally within the town centres that the housing developments have been built in. So that's all I want to add. Councillor Gerard has covered everything.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hodgkinson. Leader, do you accept the amendment to your motion?
No, Mr. Mayor.
You have 5 minutes to outline why you do not accept it.
I know we get to that time of year as we get closer and closer to elections, but this budget's about the borough. It's not about Wigan, it's not about Lee, it's not about Ashton, no, but it's about the borough and the borough as a whole in terms of what we want to deliver from it and to it. And all the district centres and town centres are as much important as each other. But one thing that you will get from investment in the Wigan Town Centre is funding to support the other town centres. And that is what we do within the budget. The other thing that we sometimes forget about, and we talked about new homes bonus, we've actually never included it in the revenue budget because it was always there to be changed. And like Councillor Gerard just said, it's out for consultation at this moment in time, and we certainly don't know what's going to come back from that. So we need to wait for that before we make any decision on it. But Mr. Mayor, once again, I've said we've delivered a balanced budget. I thank Councillor Gerard and Councillor Hodgkinson for putting their amendment together, but unfortunately for them, I can't accept it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. I will now move to the vote on Councillor Gerard's amendment. The Chief Executive will now read through an alphabetical list of members' names. So I have a point of order. Councillor Brielle, do you have a point of order? And Councillor Gerard has a point of order. Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope I'm not urging that quickly. But yeah, thank you, Councillor Molyneux, for your observations of the amendment. But when you're stating that it's all for the borough, I beg to disagree. When we're investing £47 million.
Councillor, I'm sorry, that's not a point of order.
I think you find it is, Mr. Mayor, because he stated that it's all for the borough. Trickle down economy never works. It never has and never will. We need to invest in all the town. That's what I'm asking is that we invest in all the towns significantly, not just by £600,000 spread between another 10 towns. We need significant investment, and we need it. This is not electioneering. This is crying out for.
Sorry, Councillor, that I can't accept that as a point of order. That's not a breach of procedure. He's not breaching a procedure. Councillor Brielle, do you have a point of order?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I've not done a point of order.
I
think you're wrong there.
Your name's up. Never mind. That's fine. I will now move to the vote on Councillor Gerard's amendment. The Chief Executive will now read through an alphabetical list of members' names. When your name is read out, you will simply need to unmute to confirm whether you are for, against, or abstain in relation to the vote, and then mute yourself again. Once everyone has voted, I will then declare the result of the vote. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recorded vote list. We've already had the vote from the leader, so I'll move on. Mr. Mayor?
Against.
Deputy Mayor?
Against.
Councillor Aldred?
Against.
Councillor Anderson?
Against.
Councillor Anderton?
Against.
Councillor Blay?
Against.
Councillor Brielle?
Definitely for, because they don't like being challenged.
Councillor Brown?
Abstain.
Councillor Bullen?
Against.
Councillor Collins?
Against.
Councillor Collinson?
For.
Councillor Conway? Councillor Conway?
Against.
Councillor Cullen?
Against.
Councillor Cunliffe?
Against.
Councillor Davis?
Against.
Councillor Dewhurst?
Against.
Councillor Draper?
Against.
Councillor Ellis?
For.
Councillor Evans?
For.
Councillor Gambles?
Against.
Councillor Gerard?
Believe it or not, for.
Councillor Greensmith?
Against.
Councillor Halliwell?
Against.
Councillor Harding?
For.
Councillor Hellier?
Against.
Councillor Hilton?
Against.
Councillor Hodgkinson?
A definite for.
Councillor Holland?
Against.
Councillor Edward Hulton?
For.
Councillor Kath Hulton?
Absolutely for.
Councillor Hunt?
Against.
Councillor Jones? Councillor Jones? Councillor Kelly? Councillor Kelly? Councillor Kenny?
Against.
Councillor Cleave?
Against.
Councillor Maiden?
For.
Councillor Marsh?
For.
Councillor Marshall.
Against.
Councillor Merritt.
Against.
Councillor Moody.
Against.
Councillor Clive Morgan.
Against.
Councillor Marie Morgan.
Against.
Councillor John O'Brien.
Against.
Councillor Parkinson.
Against.
Councillor Jeanette Prescott.
Against.
Councillor Paul Prescott.
Against.
Councillor Ramsdale.
Against.
Councillor Reedy.
Against.
Councillor Raymond.
Against.
Councillor Charles Rigby.
Against.
Councillor Eileen Rigby.
Against.
Councillor Roberts.
Against.
Councillor Rotherham.
Against.
Councillor Sharrett.
Against.
Councillor Eunice Smethurst.
Against.
Councillor Martin Smethurst.
Against.
Councillor Smith.
Against.
Councillor Sweeney.
Against.
Councillor Sykes.
Against.
Councillor Talbot.
Against.
Councillor Taylor.
Against.
Councillor Thorpe.
Against.
Councillor Vickers.
Against.
Councillor Wales.
For.
Councillor Wakefield.
Against.
Councillor Walker.
Against.
Councillor Watson.
For.
Councillor Whittam.
Against.
Councillor Whittingham.
For.
Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Winstanley.
For.
Councillor Winstanley.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson, can I just check you came in there at the end? Councillor Wilkinson?
For.
Thank you. I'll move to that's all the recorded vote now, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Right, just bear with us for a moment. We clear the figures. Right, the results are those for 16, those against 54, abstentions 1. So that amendment fails. Finally, we have received a further amendment to the leader's motion prior to the 12 p.m. deadline today from Councillor Winstanley, which has been seconded by Councillor Marsh. Mr. McKevitt, is this a balanced budget?
Yes, I can confirm, Mr. Mayor, the amendment from Councillor Winstanley, if accepted, would leave us with a balanced budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKevitt. Councillor Winstanley, could you introduce your amendment, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, for that. And members will be pleased to note this is the last amendment tonight. So, and I would also like to pay tribute to Paul McKevitt and the team for not only the briefing they've given us, but the help in preparing the amendment. Members, as we emerge from the pandemic into not the new normal, but the old normal, where we regain our freedom and our ability to live our lives as we see fit rather than the state tells us, I believe that we need to reignite our local economy and invest in our local towns across the borough. So firstly, I think that we need to help the hospitality industry where we can. And I particularly welcome the Chancellor's announcement today in terms of extra investment for hospitality and non-retail when they can once again legally reopen. And whilst I was preparing this amendment, I wanted us to look as a local authorities what we could do to help that hospitality sector that has been particularly hard hit over the last 12 months. And I understand that the licence fees for if you want to put out a table and chairs outside your premises have been suspended until September. But I think we need to go further than that. And I think for the rest of the financial year, as a local authority, we should look at removing all those charges for those businesses and also looking at where we can to reduce that red tape and bureaucracy to help our businesses bounce back, because we desperately need those businesses to bounce back, to pay those taxes, to regenerate the town centres, to bring people back in. So I really want us to see what we can do as a local authority to do that. And secondly, I want to see that the town centre master investor framework used to the benefit of our local communities to level them up. The Our Town Fund, I'm told, is to be launched in April. I have to say, I did have a wry smile at the deputy leader's berating of the Prime Minister about not dealing with social care because he made an announcement in July 2019. Well, the Our Town Fund was my idea probably about 3 or 4 years ago, and the Prime Minister has had quite a lot to deal with since then. He's had a pandemic, he had to get Brexit done, and yeah, Our Town Fund is only being launched in April. So and I think the Our Town Fund was a little bit easier to get sorted out than some of the other things that the government have had to deal with over the last couple of years. And I certainly welcome what has been announced tonight, but I don't think it goes as far as it should do. And I think we need to do more in that space. So we need to really look at those areas that we don't have traditional town centres, that are districts in their own right. We need to regenerate our parks and open spaces, and I note the leader's commitment to planting trees, but we need to go faster and further. We need to bring a greener, cleaner environment post-COVID. And this funding particularly needs to be focused on the communities that traditionally have missed out over many years on funding because they're not deprived. And I note what the leader said about, this is a budget for the borough, but certain parts of the borough pay a lot of money in, and we've not seen our fair share of that funding. So Orrell, Standish, Astley, Ashton, Shevington need to be at the top of this list, and we need to make sure that they are invested in and those communities are given that investment. And I hope members will support our amendment as we look to invest in our communities and offer them hope in a post-COVID Brexit Britain as we grab the opportunities that we are now in our grasp. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Winstanley. Is the amendment seconded?
It's seconded, Mr. Mayor, and I don't have anything else to add on top of what Councillor Winstanley has outlined.
Right. Thank you for your contribution, Councillor Marsh. Leader, do you accept the amendment to your motion?
No, Mr. Mayor.
You have 5 minutes to outline why you do not accept it.
Can I firstly thank Michael for the motion, for the amendment that he's put forward, and the detail that he's gone into to put it together. And I too have sympathy for the hospitality sector. I think it's an important part of our town centres and district centres, and I'd certainly like to see the Chancellor, as he said today, really supporting that sector, because it is important, because it's important to culture as well. And I'm glad to see that the Chancellor's also echoed his confidence about culture in terms of how it will bring back the economy. What I will say to Councillor Winstanley, we will have a look. I'm not accepting his amendment, but we will have a look at the support that's being given to the hospitality sector. And I'd like to say that we've been very supportive in terms of getting the grants out very quickly particularly to the hospitality sector, in terms of helping them to get through the pandemic. And can I just say on our town, I think Councillor Winsley's probably using a bit of licence really, but our town was going to be launched last year, as you well know, and you well know it couldn't be delivered because of the pandemic. So the quicker we get it out there, the quicker we can start looking at a phase 2 of that. So I'd like to say very confidently that what we will deliver through this budget will certainly make a difference to all those centres and all the people of this borough. And services across this borough affect all the borough. It's not just Wigan, it's not just Lee, it affects everybody. And can I just say, Mr. Mayor, that I'm more than happy to say that I will not be accepting the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mullinex. I'll just go over the results of the motion previously because it's different from what I said before. The ones what were for were 16, against was 53, not 54, and the abstentions was 1. So we will now move on to the vote on Councillor Winstanley's amendment. The Chief Executive will now read through an alphabetical list of members' names. When your name is read out, you will simply need to unmute to confirm whether you are for, against, or abstain in relation to the vote, and then mute yourself again. Once everyone has voted, I will then declare the result of the vote. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll read through the recorded vote list. We've already had a vote from the leader, so I'll move on. Mr. Mayor?
Against.
Deputy Mayor?
Against.
Councillor Aldred?
Against.
Councillor Anderson?
Against.
Councillor Anderton?
Against.
Councillor Blay?
Against.
Councillor Brielle?
Abstain.
Councillor Brown?
For.
Councillor Bullen?
Against.
Councillor Collins?
Against.
Councillor Collinson?
For.
Councillor Conway? Councillor Conway? Councillor Cullen?
Against.
Councillor Cunliffe?
Against.
Councillor Davis?
Against.
Councillor Dewhurst?
Against.
Councillor Draper?
Against.
Councillor Ellis?
For.
Councillor Evans?
For.
Councillor Gambles?
Against.
Councillor Gerard?
For.
Councillor Greensmith?
Against.
Councillor Halliwell?
Against.
Councillor Harding?
Against.
Councillor Hellier?
Against.
Councillor Hilton?
Against.
Councillor Hodgkinson?
For.
Councillor Holland?
Against.
Councillor Edward Hulton?
For.
Councillor Kath Hulton?
For.
Councillor Hunt?
Against.
Councillor Jones? Councillor Jones? Councillor Kelly? Councillor Kelly? Councillor Kenny?
Against.
Councillor Cleave?
Against.
Councillor Maiden?
For.
Councillor Marsh?
For.
Councillor Marshall?
Against.
Councillor Merritt?
Against.
Councillor Moody?
Against.
Councillor Clive Morgan?
Against.
Councillor Marie Morgan?
Against.
Councillor O'Brien?
Against.
Councillor Parkinson?
Against.
Councillor Jeanette Prescott?
Against.
Councillor Paul Prescott?
Against.
Councillor Ramsdale?
Against.
Councillor Reedy?
Against.
Councillor Raymond?
Against.
Councillor Charles Rigby?
Against.
Councillor Eileen Rigby?
Against.
Councillor Christine Roberts.
Against.
Councillor Rotherham.
Against.
Councillor Sharrett.
Against.
Councillor Eunice Smethurst.
Against.
Councillor Martin Smethurst.
Against.
Councillor Smith.
Against.
Councillor Sweeney.
Against.
Councillor Sykes.
Against.
Councillor Talbot.
Against.
Councillor Taylor.
Against.
Councillor Thorpe.
Against.
Councillor Vickers.
Against.
Councillor Wales.
Against.
Councillor Wakefield.
Against.
Councillor Walker.
Against.
Councillor Watson.
For.
Councillor Whittam.
Against.
Councillor Whittingham.
For.
Councillor Wilkinson.
For.
Councillor, thank you. Councillor Winstanley.
For.
Thank you. That's the end of the recorded vote list. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Bear with me for a moment. Just check these figures. And the vote is for 14, against 54, abstentions 1. We now move back to the leader's original motion. Do any members wish to speak on the leader's original motion? I have Councillor Winstanley. Would you like to start, Councillor?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Can I just thank you for your fortitude in seeing through this this meeting. I think you've been in the chair longer than the Deputy Speaker was on the Chancellor's budget today, which this budget meeting seems to have lasted a lot longer, which is quite amazing, really. So I want to start off really in a similar vein to the leader when he opened the presentations earlier on. When we set the council's budget this time last year, I think it's fair to say that no one could have expected what has happened over the last 12 months, and this pandemic will certainly have a profound effect on the social, economic, and health of our country and our community for years and generations to come. When we look at the level of debt that we're now amassing as a nation, but we had to do that in order to get us through the pandemic. And I would like to pay tribute to the staff of the council, councillors and residents of our communities who have all played their part in helping us get through this pandemic. And this has certainly been a terrible journey for some of us, and it's still with us. And let's hope as we move forward into the spring and into the summer and the vaccination programme, we can move on. And I also mentioned before, I'd like to thank Paul and his team for the work in preparing the budget, but also putting Wigan in a better state than many other local authorities as well, because I think it's fair to say that we have a great finance team here in Wigan, and we would certainly struggle without the skills and abilities that they have got and that has been able to put us in this position. But not only the last 12 months, but also the number of years, certainly since I've been a councillor, and David Smith before Paul had that position. And the position that we are in is a much healthier position than was forecast in June this year, when we were looking at a £40 million deficit in the budget. And then at the turn of this calendar year, we were looking about a £25 million deficit. And now, obviously, we've got the budget tonight and we've got an £8 million deficit, largely made up of those inflationary pressures, adult social care and children's services, which we've obviously heard from cabinet members when they've been doing the presentations. So the improved financial position from where we are from June, beginning of the year to now, is obviously down to the extra money that this Conservative government has provided to the council. And I think it'd be churlish not to recognise the £62 million given to the council over the course of the last 12 months. And in anyone's, reckoning, this is an astounding amount of money. Plus the £9.3 million that we're getting to cover the first quarter of next year, and the £3.1 million to cover the council tax scheme. So I think we do need to recognise that. And I also have to admire how this council has managed to spin this, that all this extra funding is actually from the council, when a lot of this funding, yes, they've enacted a lot of this unring-fence funding into different projects, and that's great and that's brilliant. But that money has come from central government. And, if this was coming from the EU, you wouldn't be able to, this council wouldn't be able to get away with what they've done. You'd have to have an EU flag on it and be told day after day that it come from the EU. I think the government needs to start getting a little bit tougher with councils in terms of where they're getting the money from. But of course, that would spoil the story about how the nasty Tories don't care about the North. Well, £70 million plus says otherwise, and that doesn't include the other funding we've received. I mean, tonight it's been a little bit like that scene from The Life of Brian, when they're all talking about what have the Romans done for us. Well, apart from the £12 million for King Street Heritage Action Zone, the £500,000 for Safer Streets funding from a Conservative government in Leigh, £25 million from the A49 and M58 road scheme, £20 million on cycling and walking schemes, £11 million for the enlargement of Hope School. Yes, but apart from that, what have the Tories done for us is the cry. Well, they have done a lot for us, and we can't say that they haven't. Now, we've obviously had a big debate tonight about the funding on social care, and we debated that quite in depth at the last council meeting. And so I don't intend to go over that ground again. I made my position clear. I don't believe that that is sustainable going forward, and we need to make sure that we do have fundamental reform of social care. But let's not forget, this social care problem hasn't come in the last couple of years or in the last 10 years. This has been a growing problem for all governments. And, we had a Labour government that had 13 years to do something, and they did nothing. Where Andy Burnham was Health Secretary, what happened? Absolutely nothing. So it's difficult, because if it was easy, then governments would sort it out, and that's the problem. And so we do need to make sure that we get reform in social care. I totally agree with what's been said earlier on. So we need to move on in a positive way to actually make sure that that happens. So, and it's interesting. We have a legal duty as a councillors to pass a balanced budget. And as a responsible Conservative opposition group here, we will be doing that, and we will be supporting it. And I'm glad Councillor Cunliffe raised the issue about Bolton, because I listened to that budget debate in Bolton, and the Labour group in Bolton didn't put forward any amendments. They didn't contribute anything positive to that, and just voted against it. And that council could have been in a position where they did not pass a balanced budget. We're a responsible opposition, unlike the Labour Party in Bolton. And he also says about Bolton having to, the cuts that they're making. Well, that's because of the inherent mess that was left by the Labour administration. Interesting to note that Bolton's council tax is going up 3.8%, not 3.99%. So I'm glad Councillor Cunliffe raised it, because it was giving me an opportunity to put that right. I also welcomed the 700,000 that Councillor Rahman's announced for domestic abuse. Seems remarkably similar to the 700,000 that was announced on the 12th of February by the government for Wigan's allocation of this. And I was just wondering, because I know Councillor Rahman can come back at the end, I wonder if she can confirm if that is that money, or whether this is additional money that the council have found for that. So we will be supporting the budget tonight, but that doesn't mean that we necessarily agree with all the funding that has been allocated. And I will deal with the cultural aspects of the fire within. I know the Chancellor said today about the cultural aspect of it. My point is that I don't necessarily believe at this particular point we should be spending that amount of money when we need to reignite our town centres and get the economy going again. So I believe that there is a positive future ahead for us as we move out of COVID, and tonight we will be doing the responsible thing and supporting this, but we will be certainly ensuring that the scrutiny of this budget over the months ahead comes, and we ensure that we get our fair deal for our communities outside of the main town centres. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that. It's now on. Thank you for that, Councillor Winston. I'll now move on to Councillor Gerard. Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought it was Councillor Watson before me, but
no, yeah, it's your turn, Councillor Gerard. Right. Councillor Watson.
I believe you're right there, Councillor Gerard.
Councillor Gerard is first. Councillor Watson will come after him. You are the leader of
right.
30, I understand.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So you get.
I just want to reiterate what I said a little bit earlier, that we welcome what the finance officers have done in producing this budget, and obviously it's a well-balanced budget. Unfortunately, though, we keep talking the talk, but it's very rarely we walk the walk. We keep hearing about levelling up all the borough. £600,000 to the other town centres. I won't refer to them as district centres. They're town centres. They're towns in their own right. And £600,000 isn't enough to level them up and give them a kickstart what they need, what Councillor Freeman was referring to earlier. God only knows, Tilsley, Atherton, Inley, they all need a proper kickstart, and £600,000 isn't going to cut it. I want to pick up on the investing in culture. I know it's gone over on the with the fire within, but we've got to remember over the last 10 years during austerity, civic halls gone. Where can we not? We're in Atherton, Lawton, places like this where we've lost the civic halls. Where can we put on our theatre productions? That is culture, but we get nothing in return. We've sold off libraries. We've sold off greenbelt land. We've sold off football pitches, all which would benefit the local communities, what we represent. So £250,000 doesn't sound a lot in the whole scheme of things with this budget, but it will go somewhere to improving things that we've already lost. And I don't think the fire within is good value for money on the whole. You know, it only represents a minority of people, and it may have had rave reviews by the people who go to these kind of things, but we've got bigger fish to fry, in my opinion. I want to speak about antisocial behaviour, what Councillor Anderson spoke on before. You know, I think we do need to invest in our communities. We do need to have youth provision in towns where ASB is prevalent. As we know, an underlying factor is, or the cry from a lot of people, there's nothing for them to do. That is certainly the case now in Atherton, now that we've sold off all our amenities, such as the Formby Hall, with no chance of getting the library back when we put that through. So we do need to invest in our towns and aim it at the youth, no matter what that be. And I can't see any provision for that at all within this budget. It's all aimed at the higher end and not at people who need it the most. So on that, really, I won't be voting for the budget tonight. And I'd also like to pick up on the deputy leader's point. For quite a few meetings now, we've heard him say about, we're quite envious really, about Surrey Council. And it comes up time and time again, Surrey Council. Unfortunately, we're not Surrey Council. But this may give some indication of why we keep building high-end houses on greenbelt land. Are we trying to replicate Surrey Council? Because there's nothing in this budget at all. Immediately, it's only hearsay. What will go somewhere to providing affordable housing. Time and time again, we keep allowing high-end housing to go through without the provision that's needed at the moment, which is 25% of each planning application. Time and time again, I vote for the 20, against applications where there's no, it's 100% basically of high-end housing. There's no affordable provision at all. We can't keep being envious of other councils. We've got to look after our own, and we've got to provide housing. And I'm hoping that Councillor Eamon's right, that in the coming months and over the next 12 months, we will have some kind of drive to provide social housing. But tonight, I've got no indication at all that that's going to be happening. So I've got to vote against it tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Councillor Gerard. We'll now move on to Councillor Watson, but can I remind members that there is a guillotine tonight at 10 o'clock, so we have about 45 minutes left for this debate. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and apologies for butting in there. I'll try to be quick. I'd just like to say thank you to all the officers and staff that have worked tirelessly throughout this pandemic and for the balanced budget this evening. However, I'm going to start by quoting a report dated the 16th of November 2020 by this council regarding the 1.5% social increases in rent. These rent proposals are expected to have further impact upon tenants in receipt of universal credit, as 3/4 of these tenants are already in rent arrears. That's over 5,100 households within the borough who the council already acknowledge are struggling financially. The council also identified the increased risk in council tax arrears and the impact on welfare reforms, yet it was voted through regardless. Now, 5 months on, we want to raise council tax by 3.99%. Well, I asked the council this: what are the risks? Now, the council also acknowledges that unemployment and rent arrears are more than doubled throughout this pandemic. The knock-on effect has also seen universal credit claimants also doubled, which isn't a surprise. Another statistic that this council also acknowledges. So I asked the council this: why are we putting more question on the most vulnerable low-income families in a time when we should be supporting them? The risk is putting further pressure on our already struggling vulnerable residents, many of our at breaking point, both mentally and financially. However, I do understand that COVID has put an unprecedented impact on us all, especially as council, and increase with the increase of 4.5% in expenditure and the additional strains on adult and social care, and it has left us with a future deficit of approximately £27 million, which we're trying to offset over the following 3 years. Now, let's take in consideration the ambitious Galleries Regeneration project in Wigan, where this council wants to invest an initial £46 million in partnership with a Chinese state-owned company with an appalling human rights record. Now, how in one hand can we ask our residents to dig deep in their pockets to offset this deficit, and on the other hand, we've got £46 million to invest in town centre regeneration? We must put our residents first and get back to the very basics by providing services and welfare support for our most vulnerable residents. And we must put this ambitious project on hold, at the very least, to try and offset this future deficit. I believe that Keir Starmer said this week that the Conservative government didn't care about helping the low-income families. Well, I'll take that one step further. I believe that this Labour-run council doesn't care in the welfare or interest of the low-income families. And finally, I think all the members and all of our residents need clarification on page 155 of the public support pack about the fire within Lee. The fire within Lee is £250,000. Is it, we've been told, £250,000 over 5 years for culture? If so, that's fine, but why doesn't the report reflect this? Is it for town centre improvement, town hall improvements in Lee? If so, that's fine. Why doesn't the budget reflect this? And if it is for the fire within Lee, then to be quite frankly, I'm confused right now, and I'm sure the cabinet is as well, because they couldn't even answer these questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. We'll now move on to Councillor Brielle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to speak. The councillor has just said about the council tax going up. It seems to be a bit forthcoming, you know, saying you've no money and you've got to put the council tax up and everything. People are missing out on what this government's been giving Wigan Council. Just in Hingley Green alone, there's extra 400 new houses been built. They've had a government grant of £5,000 per house. That's an extra £2 million. Then the 106 money is £700,000. Then the council tax for a year, an extra £400,000. That's £3.1 million generated. Now, just on a matter of interest, if 400 houses were built in every ward, this council will get an extra revenue of £77 million. But you keep crying poverty. Councillor Cunliffe was saying about a shortfall of £5 million for his adult care. Well, you're generating £77 million there. Or let's break it this way, £3.1 million from my ward, plus the £5 million in council tax, which you don't seem to know where you're spending it, but you've rejected my proposal to spend it in Hingley Green. Right. I suggest, from the comments from Councillor Hunt, that he expertise in giving the leader in 13th of the 3rd 2019 registered his expenses as unknown. I think somebody needs to give him help there, because if he can't add up what he spent, then obviously he shouldn't be the leader. And regarding these cabinet members, and you're moaning all the time, why don't you get out the job if you can't do it? Give us the budget and let's see what we can do with it, because we can utilise it. I've been a businessman for 30 years, and what this council does is an absolute disgrace. And going on to Councillor Anderson, 20,000 police cases not investigated. 6 of them. You don't need to worry about that. Then you're going to like supporting the environment, carbon fibre, carbon thing like that. Has anybody seen these new bin wagons going round Wigan now? They're a very low capacity. We're a bin wagon in the old system, which is still available. They possibly get about 50 tons in there. These new ones, you're only looking about 18 tons, 19 tons. So it's costing you twice as much to empty bins. Now, come on. You know, we've got employees on £140,000, £120,000, and they're buying bin wagons which are not suitable for what the job is. Them bin wagons cost £187,000 each. But yeah, nobody's checked them. Nobody's bothered about checking what's going on. And like I agree with Councillor Watson over this Chinese deal you've done. Well, I don't know where you're coming from at all. I mean, we've got working class businesses within Wigan or Greater Manchester which can do this work ample, but yet you're going to the other side of the world. What deal have you got? I think everybody's bank account should be checked. Anyway, thanks, Mr. Moore. It's been a great thing, and you know, and I've enjoyed watching you yawn and stretch. And I thought at one stage you was going to go to sleep, Mr. Moore. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm glad I'm entertaining, Councillor. We'll now move on to Councillor Maiden.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I started this meeting, I had a short crew cut, so it's grown a bit on me. Yeah, there's one or two points I'd like to make, and one or two councillors have touched on it, and it is this development at Wigan Market. Now, some have quoted 47 million, but for my figures, it's 130 million pounds being spent on a Chinese communist government-run company. Now, that in itself is bad enough. You know, we don't want to be people I speak to. We are moving away from the Chinese Chi-Com government. What's going on in the human rights record with the Uyghur Muslims, Hong Kong, organ harvesting, political dissidents being arrested? Maybe that's what Dave Molyneux wants in here. So who knows? Dave Molyneux, Councillor Molyneux, sorry. Keith Cunliffe, they're in the paper. The Wigan pound. Let's spend the Wigan pound. We're not even spending Greater Manchester pound. Lancashire, the UK, not even Europe, China. And we're spending 130 million on a Chinese company to come here, knock half of the galleries down. Get this. And everybody's mentioned Surrey about Councillor Cunliffe. Maybe that's what he's doing. He's gentrifying Wigan so it looks like Surrey. Because what we're doing in this marketplace, we have 72 stall holders, give or take 5 or 10. We are now building stalls for 40. What are we doing with them stalls? Them are working class people. Them are frontline services. They're people who pay tax into the system. They're not taking out the system. They're our frontline services, Councillor Molyneux, because without them, there is nobody to tax. We're building a 10 cinema there, 10 screen cinema. They're going bankrupt and closing. How is that going to drive the economy in Wigan? It's nonsense and it's behind the times. The thinking here is nonsense. It's not a new market we need running. It's a new council who can run one. And that's more or less me done because everybody's covered all the other stuff. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Maiden. I have Councillor Reader who wishes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make a few clarifying points here, really, to a certain degree. Councillor Winstanley spoke how good this Conservative government was and how much money they've given us. Maybe he's forgotten that we wasn't going to get very much at all until Andy Burnham and the 10 leaders over stood up and fought him on the steps of the town hall at Manchester. And then we received the money. So it wasn't a gift from the government. They were forced to do it in the end because they were embarrassed. So that was that point, Mr. Mayor. I think Michael touched on the fire within about he wants something to revigorate the town centres. This has already started doing that and it will continue to do that. I just want to make a clarification because Councillor Watson is a bit confused over the funding and I can't blame him for that. And let me just make it really clear now, without people interrupting. £250,000 is for the cultural strategy over 5 years. End of story, that's that one. The one for the Lee, what has been named under Lee, wherever I've not seen this, is for the capital build of Lee Town Hall, which is £250,000 as a one-off payment. Now, if the opposition don't want that investment into Lee Town Hall, I'm sure we can bring it back over to Wigan, but I'm sure the League members will be up in arms. But there is the clarification. £250,000 over 5 years for fire within the cultural strategy. £250,000 is for the Lee Town capital build funding. I can't make it much clearer than that. And I'm hoping that Paul McKevitt and his team will clarify that later in the week with an email to people who he's been corresponding with. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Reader. I've now got Councillor Halliwell who wishes to speak. Councillor Halliwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may respond to the issue on council rent, we have a duty and responsibility to maintain decency standards, and that's what that money will do. We've already outlined exactly where that money will be spent and how it will maintain our houses and ensure they're fit for purpose. I would also remind members that this went through the Housing Advisory Panel and the tenant reps agreed to this, and they represent the tenants on that particular committee. In respect of comments about we don't care about the welfare of people in Wigan, I think Councillor Watson has got selective amnesia. Tonight and last night at a joint meeting, we heard in some great detail about how we've supported vulnerable people right across the borough. And I think that speaks for itself. So I can't accept that. The other point is Councillor Winston tells us how much money the government has given us. What he hasn't done tonight is reminded people of this council how much money they took off us, which was about 130 million. And I stand to be corrected on that, but it was something around that figure, but we didn't mention that one tonight either. And it's about time, really, we got some of that money back. And if it comes back in the form of housing, the Heritage Action Zone, we'll have some of that, because we'd have probably been able to do something more if we'd have had the money in the first place. But when you take it off us and we haven't got it. So, Mr. Mayor, I think a number of our members tonight have had selective amnesia, and I welcome the budget that we put forward tonight. It's for the whole of the borough. That looks after all of the people, whether they are not in need or whether they are in need. And I would endorse this budget. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Halliwell. I have no other members wishes to speak, so Councillor Raymond, you reserve your right to speak as seconder. Would you like to say something now? Councillor Raymond?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would like to say something. Mr. Mayor, can I just thank all members who have contributed to the debate tonight? But can I also say that I am very disappointed to see the content of the amendments to our budgets today. We have all these political parties taking small elements of our budget, criticising them and suggesting amendments, but failing to address the main issue, and that is overall council funding. Not one of those amendments saves the council any money. All the amendments have failed to appreciate the need for investment to maintain our business rates or to support our own funding. In a couple of amendments, if we introduced the proposed amendments, it would lead the council to a path of financial disaster. Councillor Jones, coming to your amendment, we are protecting our workforce and supporting our frontline workers. We have previously announced that we would top up the pothole repair fund to £5 million and enhance our town scheme. And we are also in discussion about increasing our town scheme to about £1 million to cover the issue you raised. Councillor Watson, you have questioned our approach to our cultural offer, quoting uncertainty of Brexit and pandemic.
I'm sorry, Councillor, I have to interrupt. I have a point of order from Councillor Gerard. Councillor Gerard, point of order, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to clarify, Councillor Raymond. These amendments was quantified by our council officers, who also quantified your budget. So are you saying that our amendments, even though they was passed by the same council officers as you, would lead this council to ruin, when all it's doing, some of the amendments, is redistributing the money so that all the borough get funding and help, rather than just one or two?
All right, Councillor Gerard.
Councillor Gerard, I didn't say all of those amendments. I said some of those amendments.
Sorry, Councillor Raymond, we did ask Mr McKevitt whether it would lead to a balanced budget, and he agreed that they would. So.
Okay, Mr Mayor. So, Councillor Watson, you have questioned our approach to our cultural offer, quoting uncertainty of Brexit and pandemic. But it is worth noting that today, Chancellor has announced £400 million support package for art and culture. And he recognises the role it will play in kickstarting the economy. So our offer is not just a small exhibition. It is engagement of our youth. It is about improving chances for our local artists to come forward and kickstart the recovery. Councillor Brielle, your motion. If applied to all 24 wards, all 25 wards that we are responsible for, would cost us £125 million. I think every member present in this chamber today has a long wish list like yours for their ward. But if we fulfill all those wishes, this authority will definitely go bankrupt. What this amendment fails to appreciate is the 5 million you quote coming from Hindley Green in council tax. It doesn't cover the cost that council provides in services. I'll explain again. This council relies on government grants of around £50 million in addition to the council tax and business rates to fund its services. A significant amount of this money, around 2/3 of the funds.
Sorry, Councillor, I have a point of order from Councillor Brielle. Councillor Brielle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Point of order. Councillor I can't pronounce your name, sorry. You come across that, you know, I'm challenging it, you're going to bankrupt the council. What the problem is you're bankrupting the council because you don't know how to run it.
Councillor,
what I'm suggesting is investments in England Green, which is much needed, because money keeps going missing.
That's not
It is.
It's not a point of order. It's not breached any of the council rules. That's what a point of order is. I explained.
Well, she's making reference that, you know, it's going to go bankrupt if we do anything what we do.
No, Councillor.
I've run a business for 30 years and I'm still here.
Councillor,
I know what I'm doing.
Councillor, your proposal was put forward and Mr McKevitt agreed it would lead to a balanced budget. Councillor Raymond said if she applied it to every ward and not just yours, it would cost £125 million. I now have another point of order.
I don't think so, Mr Mayor. I think you've got your figures wrong. I'd like to see your figures, Councillor. I would like to see your figures for
Councillor, that's not a point of order. Could I ask you to be quiet, please? We have a point of order from Councillor Halliwell. Councillor Halliwell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. On a point of order, can I just clarify for Councillor Brielle that this council has never been bankrupt? We've actually dealt with our finances very well. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
That's not a council. It's not a point of order, Councillor, but thank you for your contribution. Councillor Raymond.
So, Mr Mayor, in the case of other amendments, especially galleries, investment in galleries, the business rates and service charges that we can lose are around £3 million. So this investment was very much needed to secure, and I am not apologetic about the fact that we will invest in any similar areas that preserve our income and boost our business rates. Business rates are valued and set by central government, and we have no say in the amounts, but we are left to collect and maintain this base. So our plan is to invest in stronger yield areas, and through an enhanced development programme, we will be able to reinvest in other areas. Mr Mayor, let me clarify. We bought galleries in 2018 for £8 million. And before 2014, we were funded through grants and council tax. But the government moved to funding councils by council tax, business rates and grants. So we are forced to protect our income and business rates. Government has put councils in this position, and if we do not invest in this side, we can potentially lose £3 million in our business rates, service charges and other income. Regarding supporting hospitality, we have been proactive in distributing the grants to this sector. Today, £5 billion have been announced for reopening grants, and they have been announced by the government, and I am told that they will be passed on to local authorities to be distributed. And I can assure you that we will be as proactive and efficient to distribute them as we have been in the past. Councillor Gerard, can I just say, new homes bonus hasn't been in the past spent on just junctions. We have so far kept it outside of the budget to balance the budget in adult and children's services. And going forward, you already have said that it is under consultation and we will review where the money will be spent going forward.
Sorry, Councillor, we have a point of order from Councillor Gerard.
Sorry, Nazir, but I want to refer you to the report that I've read tonight, which states that all the money, any money raised from the new home bonuses tonight have been spent on junctions tonight, and that's quite clear in the report tonight. If there's anything else what's not been put in there, I would like to know on a separate email if that's possible. Thank you.
Councillor Gerard, I will inquire that for you, but I can assure you that this money was in the past kept outside of our budget to balance our adult and social care budget and children's services in the past, but I will definitely get back to you with this. So, Councillor Winstanley, I echo your comments about Paul and our finance team, but you mentioned the support received from the government, which was very welcome. However, the £29 million this year and £9.5 million for next year is less than a quarter of what we have cut from our budget so far. And these are only
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you've used your time up, and we do stop the clock when you're interrupted. You've had 5 minutes. Sorry. Can I now ask the leader, do you wish to sum up on your motion with the support of the relevant cabinet members?
Mr. Mayor, I will sum up because it's been a very interesting evening to say the least. And can I just remind Michael, I must be as sad as you, Michael, because I also sat through the Bolton Council budget meeting, which was quite interesting to say the least. But when you start to compare Bolton's 3.8% rise in their council tax, they also quoted £32 million worth of cuts. They also talked about a serious amount of job losses, and they also would need to reduce their council tax by 12% to get anywhere near Wigan's. So, as much as you enjoyed it, I did the same. But can I thank the opposition members who actually took time out and went to briefings with the financial team, unlike some opposition members who just wish to spend the time in the chat pages just slagging each individual off. But Mr. Mayor, can I just say...
Sorry, Councillor, we have a point of order.
I hope it is a point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Brielle, you have a point of order. What rule of procedure do you feel has been breached?
I feel like he's insulting everybody. We was never offered this consultation with the finance people, as we never get offered with anything else, Councillor Molyneux. Not like you.
Councillor, I don't think that's a point of order.
Yeah, it is. Of course it is. He's telling lies. He's telling lies. You let them get away with it. You let them get away with insulting us, and it's wrong.
Could you mute Councillor Brielle, please? Councillor Maiden.
Can you send me that, Mr. Molyneux?
Councillor Brielle, mute Councillor Brielle. Councillor
be quiet.
Maiden, you have a point of explanation.
Yeah, Councillor Molyneux, I mean, I would love to go to the opposition financial briefings, but because it's opposition and then the second in opposition, us as smaller fringes and groups, we're not allowed to go to them. And that's the fight I've been having since the day I've been elected.
Councillor, that's not a point of explanation. A point of explanation is where you said something prior to this.
But I'm picking up.
You think misunderstood?
Yeah, because I have been tapping in the chat box and I don't go to the briefings. So
that is not a point of explanation. Okay. So back to the leader, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And can I just remind you that the Labour group doesn't get a briefing. So, Mr. Mayor, I think tonight we've shown that we've got the right budget in place to serve all the borough. Sometimes members forget that the services we provide cover every part of this borough, adult social care, children's services, highways. Everything that we do covers the full length of this borough. And can I say, Mr. Mayor, I'm very confident that the budget that we will approve tonight is the right budget for this authority, and it will make sure that the prosperity of this borough carries on for a long time to come. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Leader. I will now move to the vote on the original motion and remind members that the Chief Executive will now read out through a list of members' names. When your name is read out, you will simply need to unmute to confirm whether you are for, against, or abstain in relation to the vote, and then mute yourself again. Once everyone has voted, I will then declare the result of the vote. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move to read out the recorded vote list. The leader has already voted. Mr. Mayor?
For.
Deputy Mayor? Councillor Aldred?
For.
Councillor Anderson?
For.
Councillor Anderton?
For.
Councillor Blay?
For.
Councillor Brielle?
Against.
Councillor Brown?
For.
Councillor Bullen?
For.
Councillor Collins?
For.
Councillor Collinson?
Against.
Councillor Conway?
For.
Councillor Cullen?
For.
Councillor Cunliffe?
For.
Councillor Davis?
For.
Councillor Dewhurst?
For.
Councillor Draper?
For.
Councillor Ellis?
For.
Councillor Evans?
For.
Councillor Gambles?
For.
Councillor Gerard?
Unfortunately, against.
Councillor Greensmith?
For.
Councillor Halliwell? Councillor Halliwell?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Harding?
For.
Councillor Hallier?
For.
Councillor Hilton?
For.
Councillor Hodgkinson?
Abstain.
Councillor Holland?
For.
Councillor Edward Hulton?
For.
Councillor Kath Hulton?
For.
Councillor Hunt?
For.
I think Councillor Jones has left. Councillor Kelly? I think Councillor Kelly's left. Councillor Kenny?
For.
Councillor Cleave?
For.
Councillor Maiden?
Against.
Councillor Marsh?
For.
Councillor Marshall?
For.
Councillor Merritt?
For.
Councillor Moody?
For.
Councillor Clive Morgan?
For.
Councillor Marie Morgan?
For.
Councillor O'Brien?
For.
Councillor Parkinson?
For.
Councillor Jeanette Prescott?
For.
Councillor Paul Prescott?
For.
Councillor Ramsdale?
For.
Councillor Reedy?
For.
Councillor Raymond?
For.
Councillor Charles Rigby?
For.
Councillor Eileen Rigby?
For.
Councillor Roberts?
For.
Councillor Rotherham?
For.
Councillor Sharrett?
For.
Councillor Eunice Smethurst.
4.
Councillor Martin Smethurst.
4.
Councillor Smith.
4.
Councillor Sweeney.
4.
Councillor Sykes.
4.
Councillor Talbot.
4.
Councillor Taylor.
4.
Councillor Thorpe.
4.
Councillor Vickers.
4.
Councillor Wales.
4.
Councillor Wakefield.
4.
Councillor Walker.
4.
Councillor Watson.
Against.
Councillor Whittam.
4.
Councillor Whittingham.
4.
Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Wilkinson.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Winstanley.
4.
That concludes the recorded vote list, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Right, just bear with us while I get the results.
Mr. Mayor, may I speak?
No, you can't speak on this issue now, Councillor. What is it? What is it? Is it something other?
Well, I know I was called twice, and I note that Councillor Wilkinson was called 3 times. Now, I was deep in thought, because what I was thinking about was there was a noise, let me call it simulated flatulation that occurred twice while the leader was speaking, which I take great exception to.
Not discussing that now, Councillor. You'll have to leave it till next time.
Well, can I? Is it too late for me to vote?
Yes. Unfortunately, you've missed it.
Even although one councillor was called 3 times and I was only called twice.
Because we've collated the votes now and it's ended. Unfortunately, you've missed out. The results of the votes are for 62, against 6, abstentions 1. That concludes the business for this evening. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the night. Bye.